Hey, welcome to episode 34 of the PoddyC. So, once again, you've got an intro with old Dratnos in full screen, and you're wondering what went wrong this time. Well, let me tell you, we recorded this podcast on Tuesday, and then on Wednesday, Blizzard Entertainment posted a massive change to how tanks work defensively. So, here's what we did. Max and Dorki were streaming, I was recording, and we got together, and then Growl popped up as well. And we kind of yapped for a little bit about the tank changes. And then what Fronk, our lovely editor, is going to do, because he loves doing this so much, is he's going to splice that content in, maybe at the start here, probably at the start, because it's the most relevant stuff. I'm not telling you how to do your job, Fronk, but if I was you, it would probably be at the start. And he's going to splice it so that it's just the interesting bits of that conversation. And then we'll go into the regular podcast, and maybe if there's some really boring stuff in the regular podcast, we'll cut that out. I don't know. We'll see how that goes. And it'll probably be a longer episode if I had to guess, so that's why things are the way that they are. Now enjoy the show.
Hello, welcome back to the PoddyC. We have deleted the most boring part of this podcast, which we recorded on Tuesday.
Which part was it?
I don't.
Tuesday night.
Was there even any boring stuff in there? Maybe it's just a super long poddy. I don't know.
It could be a super long poddy. Either
Either
something boring has been removed, or you are getting extra content. Either way, subscribe to our Patreon immediately. And we are going to talk about the tank tuning. So you two, especially you guys tank right now. I haven't tanked in years. What was your initial reaction upon reading this today?
Gut reaction negative. Gut reaction, a lot of the baseline changes worry me quite a bit. I actually think that quite a lot of the changes are good, but the general idea of removing tank power, I don't like on a visceral level. I don't know. So one of the big changes to me that actually seems kind of smart is the Blood Decay one. The big change to Blood Decay is Death Strike now only heals you from any given hit once. So it looks back at the last 5 seconds, heals you from damage in those 5 seconds. But then if you use it again within the next 5 seconds, it won't double count. So anything that it heals from, it gets removed from the tracker for the next one, which is a huge nerf and change to how Blood Decay would work. But to me, that seems like a kind of healthier way for the spec to work. If you think about Blood Decay, they've kind of had a problem making it good but not broken in any given tier. It's
And you think that's what causes that?
I think that this is a good way to change that so that they now have... I think it'll be a lot easier to balance this spec. The thing is, I would have loved to see this paired with a % increase on the amount of healing they get from recent damage taken, rather than, general nerfs across the board, right? I would like to see power level agnostic, this change being put in rather than this is part of a nerf package. So that's kind of where I'm at with a lot of these changes. Is I think that, the way they nerfed Prop Pally is they reduced the importance of standing in Consecrate and reduced the importance of your Shield of the Righteous being up, which, if that was power level neutral, I actually think is a good way to move that spec. I just don't like that they are bringing the power down. But I do like a lot of the specific ways where, if you had to nerf these specs, I think they've picked really good ways to do it.
Yeah, I also did like how they changed Blood Decay. The problem is that alone is not enough. I think that alone kind of just ruins Blood Decay rather than fixes the issue. I agree with you, Dratnos, where you were saying it's a healthier way of balancing Blood Decay, but they need to make drastic changes to how the class functions outside of Death Strike. And in terms of what the Blue Post was saying, they said a lot of good things. I just don't really see them going through with their promises. They've said this about healing in the past, right? They actually had an exact post that was super similar to this in the beginning of Dragonflight. Someone linked the post to me, and it read almost the same as how this post was reading. But it's just really hard to not doom about this whenever Blizzard usually fails to accommodate for the changes. And we've seen it with the healer changes too, when they talked about addressing healers by increasing stamina and increasing the damage mobs are doing. It just didn't really do anything because they didn't adjust all the encounters that were supposed to do less damage for a smoother and steadier health bar.
Right. Like, yeah,
And
because
this
if you
feels
look
just
at
like
each of
that.
the bullet points, right, it's like tanks will take more damage overall, but shouldn't die significantly more often. Sounds good. Tank damage intake should be steady and not too fast. Sounds great. Tanks will still have strong answers to threats or period of danger, but less sustained self-healing. Maybe that bullet point isn't one that I would say sounds good too, but at least, you know, sounds fair maybe. Healer gameplay should not be dominated by tank healing. Sounds great. Tank gameplay should not be should not significantly change or require actions like kiting to survive. Also sounds great. So they have this post with like 5 bullet points that sound great, and then a bunch of patch notes that just seem really hard to make those bullet points. They seem like they mostly pull in the opposite direction from all those bullet points.
But I'm glad those bullet points exist though, because you knowing, besides just releasing the changes, like releasing what goals they want, that allows you to go back to them later and point out that it didn't solve that. Like if they didn't post any of these things, you wouldn't really know what to complain about. But like, just imagine you do feel like you have to kite. Healing does feel like it's dominated by tank healing. Tanks feel like they don't have answers to threats, right? Tank damage is still spiky, whatever. You can like basically point right back to this and be like, hey, like you guys did not. You can either help them make new changes, revert, whatever, but like you have things to go off of to actually like give them. So I'm really glad they actually gave all these points, because you are right, Dratnos. If you just read all of these outside of the where with this one, the like tanks will still have strong answers but less sustained self-healing. I know a lot of good tank players definitely enjoy the ability to keep themselves alive as a way to challenge themselves. The role is kind of boring and would push away good players, I think, if it didn't have a lot of that. That's kind of the fear. That would be good. Well, I mean, you played it a little bit on beta today, right, Dorki? How did this feel compared to, I'm assuming you've done this recently before these changes. Like, what's the main thing you feel?
Honestly, it was pretty unimpactful. I don't feel like a significant difference in terms of how much more or how much less self-sustained I am or how much more durable I'm supposed to be. It didn't really feel like they were making our health bars any more steady. But in terms of the Blood Decay stuff, the Blood Decay stuff does feel odd. Because, like, basically what happens is if you take a big hit, you're able to recover, right, with that Death Strike. But after that Death Strike, if you're ever taking, like, small damages at a time, you can't really top yourself off. You kind of, like, are somewhat reliant on a healer to, like, get your HP bar back to a, like, steady amount where you can just get into the flow of Death Striking. But so far it hasn't been too noticeable. It hasn't been too impactful.
That's good. Yeah, another change came in. I don't know if it was hotfixed in or if it was the same time as this, but Fortified got a nerf too. Fortified got nerfed to 20% increased damage from 30%, which gut reaction to this is like, oh no, I like Fortified more than Tyrant, but actually like reducing the damage modifier from Fort I think is good, right? Because like,
yeah, the damage part is fine.
Oh, that's huge.
Yeah, this is like nice that the trash is going to be effectively like less lethal but equally durable as before. So I actually think that change is kind of big and good, right? Reduce it, like trash is going to do close to 10% less damage in keys as a result of this change, which maybe offsets the tank defensiveness in a lot of cases, nerfs. And if you look at like Brewmaster's maybe, I think Brewmaster's getting buffed out of all this. I don't know. I saw you playing it, Dorki, and you died, but I thought that was maybe like a skill gap issue or something. But like they buffed the stagger damage by 8%, which is a lot.
Yeah.
Like there are a lot of stuff in here. The armor from Brewmaster's Balance,
Magic Stagger.
Yeah, Magic Stagger, you know, huge. Like that, it's hard to overstate just how valuable each % increase of staggered damage is as well. As you approach 100%, they're increasingly valuable in a way that's like hard to wrap your head around just how much value you're getting out of each extra one. So like start of expansion, it's a big buff. By end of expansion, the fact that baseline stagger has been buffed by 8% for Brewmaster is going to make them really, really chonky.
Dratnos, I'd like to correct you for a second there. It's actually a healer issue. The healer,
the healer should have kept him up.
I don't know why the healer didn't keep me alive, but that is how Ion intends.
I guess, yeah. Now we're moving to a world where if a tank dies, it's the healer's fault. So you and I are now blameless, and any
exactly.
Any
I mean, how could it possibly be the tank's fault?
Okay, yeah. I mean, if we can get everybody on board with this, I can support these changes. Then, as long as the group finder, as long as if you go into the group finder and your tank dies, we're blaming the healer, then this post is totally worth it.
I still hate that. I haven't tanked in a while, but like the idea that you could play extremely well and a healer didn't heal you and then you died makes me want to like throw my computer out of my window. That I hate that aspect. But like I think maybe what rubbed me the wrong way a lot of this is also just how they phrased it. Like we've spoken a lot about how defenses affect the game, but we're kind of always speaking about specifically non-tanks. Like at the beginning they say, in some cases, we've seen it be optimal to do group content without a healer at all. But that's not a tank thing.
Right.
That is a...
Yeah, that was so bad.
Yeah, that set me off on the first sentence. With the introduction of Dragonflight talent system and season-over-season changes, tanks in World of Warcraft have become extremely durable relative to non-tank characters. That's just wrong. It's like non-tank characters have actually gotten the amount of power there and the off-healing and everything that went with that. And like, yeah, like I think... Like, groups having a healer is a good thing, but that's not because healers need to be healing tanks more, right? It's because of the amount of defensives, the amount of off-healing, and just the in general healing imbalance that they've added into the game. But, like, so I think the way they initially phrased it just made all of it seem really weird. But you guys are saying, like, oh, well, tanks still feel fine. You feel like you don't have to kite. I think it's going to take until the expansion to kind of see that. But I wonder how... I think a lot of players who play tank at a high level definitely like having that. Like Dratnos, you said you had a visceral reaction to this. Like tanks want to feel like the decisions they're making have more weight, more impact. Like if you do this at the entire opposite end of the spectrum, the most extreme version of both of these things, right? The one where Blizzard hates it is where healers literally never look at tanks' health bar and tanks are entirely self-sufficient. The opposite of that is like classic WoW. Tanks, no matter what buttons you press, that doesn't matter for your health bar. You are entirely reliant on healers like offsetting their holy light cast to heal you in between auto attack swings and shit like that, right? So like it's about where it lands. I think a lot of top level players, at least, which is where we are surrounded by and are biased by, you don't want that to meet in the middle. You want that to meet as close to self-sustainable as possible, correct?
Yeah.
That's what people want.
It's tough because, like, in a sense, that puts a lot more responsibility on the tank side of things. But I don't know. I feel like if you make tanks less self-sustainable, like, I don't know, pugging in Shadowlands Season 1, for instance, when it was as close to the classic side of that as it's been in the last decade, it's not like tanks didn't get blamed for dying in pugs in that spot. It just happened more often. And, like, you were just supposed to kite, right? And, like, I don't know. I feel like that adds a layer of skill. Like kiting is certainly a skill as well, but I don't think it's one that is particularly fun for most tank players is when you are obligated to kite. And it seems hard for this set of changes to not cause at least some increase in the amount of kiting that is called for. But I don't know, I was watching Dorki do the keys and he wasn't kiting that much. So it's possible that this is a fear that's going to go unsubstantiated.
Well, again, the fear, no one's going to know how this feels until the expansion comes out, because still this game is complete nonsense.
Yeah, that is part of the problem as well, is that still, like, the 6 tanks are also all still tuned in completely different ways. Also, Augmentation Evoker, the value of the armor from an Augmentation Evoker has gone up substantially with these changes as well.
Yeah,
which
no one likes to see that.
Aug is actually going to be more valuable than ever before.
Like, if you're trying to tank with, if you don't want to kite, yeah, I think bringing the Augmentation Evoker is going to be like a locked spot for once you're getting the keys up in those double digits.
So a lot of
sorry, go ahead, Dorki. It'll also heavily help with the healer's lack of healing because, like, the damage in these dungeons have been insane.
So more of aside from the actual changes and how it feels on beta, again, just more issues I have with stuff they were saying. So I need a little bit of your all's help here, because I did like a lot of tanking in my WoW time, and my opinion is, well, I'll read their thing first and then I'll say this. So on the section of tank damage intake should be steady and not too fast. One of our goals for these changes is to smooth out the rate tanks take damage and reduce surprise spiky deaths. And I asked my chat, like, okay, I haven't tanked this expansion. Is it like, it seems to me from looking at it that the amount of spiky deaths that happen, not to everyone, clearly in this expansion, it has been a massive problem that all non-tank players' deaths are very spiky and things are way less linear. That is something we've complained about a million times with the defensive problem in this game. That is not something that I don't think applies to tanks. Like, as tank players, do you guys feel like, not the last few expansions, but like this expansion, tank deaths have been more surprise and spiky in like raid or in +10s or in all those things rather than normal? Obviously, high keys, you're always going to hit an infinite scaling. You could die if you don't have cooldown coverage, whatever. But like, it seems like tanking has generally played the same for a while. Or do you guys feel like in Dragonflight specifically, in all content, you're likely to die more to quick spike damage as tanks as well as non-tank characters? Or do you guys think that that's not true?
Well, one thing for sure is in Dragonflight, they have introduced way more tank busters. It's much more common for encounters to have like a 15-second constant magic tank buster, whereas in the past it was like not so true. And it was really evident when you go from season 3 of Dragonflight into season 4, because season 3 we had 6 old dungeons, right? We had Ataldazar, Waycrest, all that stuff, and tanking was like significantly easier compared to season 4, which were all new dungeons. It was 8 Dragonflight dungeons, and yeah, there is a lot more spiky tank deaths, but you can usually attribute that to misplay. Anytime a tank dies to spiky damage, it's like a misplay. Which, I mean, I guess you could kind of say is the same for DPS as well, but that's only because DPS have so many defensives nowadays, and you're expected to be rotating through all these defensives for every spiky instance of damage.
Like, do you feel like tanking in your damage intake in Dragonflight feels majorly different than, like, in BFA Shadowlands? Like, it's a massively different experience to tank in dungeons and raids, or do you think the damage intake is pretty similar?
I would say it's similar.
I think there are definitely some fights and some dungeons where it's like, oh yeah, this is challenge. Like if you're doing Ruby life pools, first boss, second boss as a tank, those are tank bosses in a way that don't often exist in a lot of previous expansions, right? Where it's like just living as a tank on those fights is a genuinely hard thing. I think Aberrus, if you were doing like Sarkarath Rashok, also kind of felt like that too, where a lot of the pressure was just on being a tank and doing the tank mechanics properly and like surviving that stuff. But it's certainly not like all fights. I do think it's more fights in dungeons than the average expansion though.
So
yeah, it's more so the encounters than classes.
Okay, and we've always talked about Blood DK being like super hard to balance, right? Because it's like when it's made well, and I think in raid tanking, I think is when they accomplish this the most, where it's like, you know, you're gonna take that upfront spiky damage, like that's the point, but like, you know, the line between it instantly dying on pulls to melee because of that, but then also being infinitely self-sustainable once you get into your rhythm is like something that has seemingly been impossible to balance, and it's pretty much the last few years just turned into they're always unkillable raid tanks, but like way too unreliable for super high scaling keys. So it sounds like Dratnos, you're kind of a fan of them maybe moving away from that. I'm a little hesitant to be a fan of like kind of homogenizing Blood DK into being a little bit more similar to the other like kind of proactive damage reduction tank classes. Like that makes me feel like
it does make it a little bit more similar to the other tanks, but I don't know. I feel like it was just fundamentally impossible to land it in a healthy spot where it's not just unkillable demon tank versus, or like, you know, falls over to one auto attack. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, I've said the exact same about Blood DK, because like DK by design in infinitely scaling content will just always be either the most broken tank or the worst tank. Like, there's almost never a patch. Like, if you think about it, right? DK has almost always been on both ends of the spectrum. It's very rare that DK is like a solid tank. And I think that's just because of like how it's designed. It's designed for like a certain level of damage threshold before it falls over. And like, you know, if you go beyond that threshold, it just dies. And if you don't go beyond that threshold, then it just becomes unkillable. And there's kind of like no in between with DK. But again, like the only way you would really fix that is by homogenizing it more, right? Just making it more similar to a Vengeance DH, for example, you know, giving it more mitigation so that it doesn't get clapped or you can maybe reduce their self healing. But again, that also makes it feel more like Avenge's DH.
Dude, Dratnos, I know you said that like this Death Strike line of like you're actually a fan of that, bro. I had a complete mental breakdown when I read this today. I like when you learn how to play DK, I think when people say you have to like feel blood DK, what they mean is feeling this window. They're like feeling the 5-second window. Like it's kind of weird to describe, but if you've played a lot of blood DK, when you press Death Strike, you like kind of know exactly how much it's going to heal you based on just what your health bar has looked like for the last couple seconds, and that's really where to me a lot of the fun comes from. Maybe I'm overthinking it, but this line is the thing I am probably the most opposed to in all of these changes. And again, maybe this is the thing. Like you said, maybe you're opposed to it too, but you said like it could be the healthy change that is needed. But I just, the idea of you getting absolutely railed in a pack. There's multiple ways you can prepare for a bunch of damage as a DK. There's like, you have low RP, but then a lot of runic power generators that you can do in quick succession to heal twice in a row quickly. Or there's like generating a lot of runic power to be able to heal through a lot of damage, maybe like 2 or 3 death strikes in a row. If you do the 2 or 3 death strikes in a row, it's going to be so hard to get used to that now.
Yeah.
Or it's going to be unviable. Like you're going to death strike to full, go down to 15%, death strike for like 40% of your health, and then you immediately know you're dead before you die, and then you die, right? And like I don't know, like I just feel like Vengeance Demon Hunter are going to be more effective blood DK now than blood DKs are. Unless they buff their passive mitigation a lot more. And then if they do that, I just don't even know what the fuck we're doing here. I don't know what that class looks like. It just sounds like a less fun, like, prot warrior, kind of. But it's not even putting shield block up. It's you just have shield block baked in. I don't know. It's like a weird guardian druid, you know? It's like it's going to feel more like frenzied regen than pressing Death Strike.
Yeah, it's going to be weird.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of just want to press a Death Strike every 5 seconds, right? And then if you have to press it more often than that, it's, you know, it's like losing value, right? Like if you press 3 Death Strikes in 10 seconds versus 2, you're just healing for basically the same amount, except unless you go into the Death Strike minimum thing. So you're going to want to use your other globals on other stuff unless you need to press the Death Strike to live to the next global type thing. I don't know. I mean, DK, sometimes you're supposed to go Death Strike, but like usually you're supposed to weave other stuff in anyways. Yeah. So as long as you're doing that, you're already going to have a Death Strike that's looking back at 3 or 4 seconds.
Railed,
right? And if you're getting railed hard enough, like there's going to be enough damage in that 1.5 seconds for it to look back on, right?
Yeah,
it's more so of a chip damage.
Like, yeah, chip damage is going to be
bloody
nastier.
Chip damage,
but I mean, you still are getting blood shield against that, right? Like you're still getting blood shields off of your Death Strike that then are counting towards your next Death Strike as it gets eaten through. So, you know, if you're in a Mastery build or like Mastery Verse, are both going to kind of scale the amount that you can self-sustain, and Haste kind of isn't in a weird way, which is kind of weird for DK. Like Haste is sort of Haste is losing value in this world by quite a bit. At least it seems to me. I don't know. This is one of those changes where I agree with you that it's like a big change, but I do think that Blood Decay has needed a big change to move it out of this broken or bad paradigm that it's been. I mean, if you think about Blood Decay and M+ for the past 10 years, right? It's like Blood Decay is either really, really, really good or really quite bad because it's balanced in such a way where it dies to a single auto attack from a trash mob in a +15, right? And like,
yeah,
this I think gives them now the flexibility, right? Like now you're getting more, you can give them more baseline armor without it just meaning they're going to run away with the pull in every pull.
No, I mean, that's the thing with Dratnos. Like, I feel like they need to make more of those changes before.
Yeah, I mean, there is just the one Bone Shield armor change. I mean, it's 25% more armor on Bone Shield is already quite a big baseline defensiveness increase.
It's not a whole lot.
I think maybe
I do think
sorry, go Dorki.
Just yo-yos a little bit too much still.
Yeah, I mean, of course, like them trying to design it so that blood decays need external healing is fundamentally weird as well. I think there's also going to take a little bit of time before you play with healers that are used to actually healing a blood decay, because like right now a good healer knows that if you heal a blood decay you're wasting a global, and like that ceasing to be true is going to take some getting used to as well, for not just the tank but for the healer.
I mean, the first time someone who's really good, like when you die right now as a tank, there's kind of some solace in knowing that it's 100% your fault, right?
Yeah.
And what's going to suck is dying, and you don't want to displace blame. That's bad habit. So you want to take blame, but then there's like something inside of you, and you're like, I don't know, maybe I just didn't get healed. And then now you're like, unironically, because what a lot of bad tanks do, by the way, is they like die now or in the past expansion or two, and then they open their death log looking for a healer to blame for not healing them, and every single one of those players is dog shit. Right now,
God damn.
Now you are like planning to look at your health bar, and that's actually correct. And who is to know whether you actually could have played better? Well, usually you know that, whether you admit it or not. Or like whether actually someone just didn't heal you, or even having to ask is almost embarrassing. I think that just kind of sucks. But also,
yeah, it is 100%. Like that's the worst thing ever. By the way, if you're a tank and it feels so bad having to ask for more heals.
Yeah,
like you never want that situation, but it looks like they want that situation.
If you're a DPS in the party and a tank dies and you reset the key and the tank pipes up and comms and go, did you really get a lot of healing on me there? I immediately am like, yo, this tank stinks. Like, I do not want to play this with this guy again. Right, because like that's the worst sign ever when someone says that. So like, yeah, I don't know. But also just part of this, man, it's just like, clearly we've discussed this defensive thing over and over again. And we've used buzzwords and talking points like spiky damage and like your health bar isn't linear. You've used examples of how our raid frames looked at the beginning of Shadowlands and other expansions. And then like you're always mentioning, you're using that verbiage, and then you read this article and they're using all of that verbiage. Like, right? Like it's like spiky, quick damage intake, not smooth. You know, we're for DPSing, we're not bringing a healer. And it's just all of the things we've talked about, but it's like, it's as if like the problem is in front of you on the board, and there's this big circle that says non-tank defensives and off healing and throughput and all that stuff, and that's the problem. And then they chose the very, very small circle right next to it where it's like maybe tanks have a little bit too much self-sustain, and I just hope I just hope that they still acknowledge that this is not why that's a problem. Like this may need to happen. We may do the expansion, and it's like, you know what, tanking still feels fine, and in which case this is probably good. Right? That may happen in beta over the next few weeks or on release, whatever. Like if you're not kiting and you still feel like you have some agency, but also healers feel like healing is more fun, this could just be a W, right? But I hope that they realize, and I guess they've acknowledged in an interview recently, that like a lot of the issues in the game that have been pointed out a million times, they're using a lot of the words here in that, and I feel like it's just applying to something else and not this. I just hope that that is still looking to get addressed, because this is not, tanks are not the reason we are not bringing a healer to groups at all. And they said that, right? Tanks, because the Dragonfly talent system, tanks are extremely durable relative to non-tank characters. That's just not true. That's like the very first paragraph of this makes me think that they have the wrong idea, basically. What were you saying, Dorki?
They were lying about that.
Yeah, that's just not true.
That's a fucking lie.
Yeah. So, yeah, I don't know, but a lot of the actual changes could be fine. Like, I don't want to like overly doom, but then it like turns out it still feels fine to play. Because like, here's a reality: Blizzard releases this thing saying, "Hey, tanks are a little bit too strong," and then the expansion comes out and it's all chill, and they were right. And tanks, there's a difference between being like self-sustained. Like, okay, you can make every decision right as a tank and live, and you like live by a lot, or like barely live, right? Barely live is actually more fun.
A lot more fun,
right?
Yeah.
It's a lot more fun, right? So like there's a world where they're nerfing your self-sustain, but it's still mostly possible to still be mostly in charge of your own deaths, and they're just bringing that line closer to barely possible. And then these changes are just good, right? But it's kind of hard to really draw the line there, and I think the verbiage just really kind of set me off the deep end, making me think they just like completely didn't understand.
It's 100% the verbiage, because I don't know if that's what they're going for. Like, yeah, if we don't really feel the changes, as I've been like saying on beta, like if it's not much of a thing, then maybe they fail to accomplish their goals, right? Or maybe that's just what they were going for. It's hard to say.
Yeah.
But I have heard a lot of arguments for this. I remember specifically a couple of weeks ago, Yumi TV was actually talking about this. He was saying how tanks are too strong, and he would prefer if tanks were weaker, because basically like what happens a lot of times, especially in pug scenarios, is a tank would pull like a maniac, because like, you know, tanks are so tanky, they're able to pull 2, 3, 4 packs at a time, but the group can't handle it. So the idea is that they want to bottleneck the tank so that the tank isn't just pulling 2-3 packs at a time and just consistently keeping it down to like, a standard one pull at a time. That way the group isn't falling apart because the tank is being a maniac. And that is like pretty true in pugs.
Yeah.
And also like another scenario is like they're probably also trying to avoid the situation where tanks are the last one left in a boss fight. Like say you're doing, I don't know, Yasma and Nataldazar, last boss. The tank's going to be the last one alive, right? Everyone's going to be falling over left and right because they're very failing mechanics or the healer is lacking. And the tank is just able to solo the fight for like the last 30%. So I would imagine that's also probably something that they're trying to avoid. And they want it to be more in line with each other.
I think that's fair. Like, I don't think that a tank should be able to... I think a good tank should be able to live on a boss by themselves for like 45 seconds, and a bad tank should be able to do it for like 15 seconds, rather than like a good tank can do it indefinitely and a bad tank can do it for a minute. So I think that is an admirable goal. I think that, definitely we don't want tanks to just solo bosses. And I think that, if there's a case where tanks can pull 3 packs and survive and the rest of the group dies, that is also bad, and it's good if they try and change that. Although my tanking experience on beta wasn't really true that there was like, unless I was playing Blood DK, it didn't feel like there were a lot of pulls I could set up like that in previous weeks. Usually, like, I felt like my survivability was a big limiting factor already, and I already felt like I was relying on a healer healing me to, survive these pulls. So that's part of why I'm skeptical here, is I feel like it's already moved enough in this direction that it didn't feel like it needed to move more. Like, Dorki, you remember we were doing that Necrotic Wake, and everybody was dead on the second boss except for me, and the boss was at 0.4% health, and I barely got it over the finish line, right? And, like, I was dead next auto, probably. It was...
Well, to be fair, that part of it was because you were a Pro Warrior.
Right, yeah,
like
which obviously, like, there's one of the big problems on beta is if you talk to different tanks playing different specs, because the tuning is just so far over the place, somebody playing one tank could be like, yeah, this is great, I felt OP, and another tank is like, what do you mean? I'm already, like, I can't live at a +2, and it's just because the tanks are... yeah, I mean, it's not a tank-specific problem, right? It's just, like, all 39 specs are balanced farther apart than ever before this close to an expansion launch.
Dude, there was another thing they put in here. They said that if tanks are not threatened enough, then the most challenging part of endgame content can become keeping DPS and healers alive, often against high burst damage. Making tank survival a more involving element of group gameplay could give us some freedom to ease up on the threat to other group members. So reading this sounds good, but it also makes me think that those two things aren't really correlated, right? Like, I feel like group damage and tank damage they don't like scale linearly like that, but...
Well, I mean, that's kind of what we were saying, though, right? Like if you pull 2 packs at a time, the tank might not be threatened, but the group becomes suddenly threatened.
There is an intrinsic relationship there, though, right? Like, if you're doing, say, again, a Necrotic Wake, the pulls upstairs in the Necropolis, and your whole group is taking damage, then your tank is in more danger because your healer has half as many globals, or like a third as many globals available to put into your tank, right? So, like, it is important that if you're a good tank, you are extremely aware that if I'm at 20% health and the rest of the group is also at 20% health, you're in a lot more danger than if you're at 20% health and the rest of the group is topped, right? Like, that is a very scary time.
Yeah, I mean, like, clearly the design in this game is going more and more towards, like, please don't pull 2 packs at one time. Like, please don't do that. We will do whatever it takes for you to not to do that. And the result of that has been, like, just adding more and more mechanics, which people have noted in the War Within beta is, like, absolutely insane. But, like, maybe they're like, okay, well, maybe another thing, guys, please, maybe if the tanks are too weak and you can't do that, and you can't heal the tanks through 2 packs, then okay, we'll meet you halfway. We'll remove some of these crazy mechanics that are making you not pull more mobs, right? That's kind of how this reads, right? Because we feel like these are so challenging. And I think if that becomes the case, that would be a good thing, right? Because I think the entire game is in drastic need of them reducing the amount of mechanics dungeons.
Yeah, although that would really heavily incentivize the pull it with defensives, get some threat and kite paradigm.
That's all. Yep. That is also very true, because that's exactly what happened in Season 1 Shadowlands. Like, tanks in Season 1 Shadowlands weren't pulling less. You were still going as aggressive. The only difference in that expansion or that patch was you're just cutting around in a circle instead. So, like, yeah, you're pulling 3-4 packs, and you're just going to sit there with your defensives up. And after that, you're either kiting or you're rotating through Treants and cardboard assassins and fucking Ursals and all that bullshit. And that just makes the gameplay so much worse because I've tried asking my chat this earlier too, and it seems like majority of players found that to be dog shit. Whether it was healers or tanks or DPS, it was just not a good experience when your tank is frantically running all over the place and mobs are spread across like 10 yards or 20 yards, and you're playing with like wild spirits from Hunter, Ellie Shaman Earthquakes, flame patches from Fire Mage. So it's just awful all around for all the players. And like even the healer can't really do much about the tank's survivability because it's like how much healing can you do to keep the tank alive? Like not a whole lot. You're just gonna get clapped if all the mobs end up mailing the tank. But it does feel like they're trying to go back to like a more classic mindset, and I just don't know how successful they can be with that because I've seen some of Yumi TV playing hardcore WoW, and when he was playing hardcore WoW, like like the gameplay, it was basically like the tank pulled as big as the tank could to survive, and if the tank died, then the rest of the group was dead too, and all it was literally just Growl standing there spamming flash heal on the tank, and I mean like maybe that's what they're going for. It's hard to say.
Speaking of Growl, I just asked Growl to join this channel, and he heard you call him Yumi TV, and he's here right now.
Wow. That's my favorite.
And
Or WoW, the best version of WoW.
So Pete's here, and I wanted to get a healer perspective. We're just a bunch of idiot tanks talking about these tank changes. Do you want to heal tanks more in a dungeon? Is that something that you think this addresses? And what did you think about a lot of Blizzard's points they made at the beginning of this?
So in terms of healing tanks more in dungeons, I don't think that's necessarily the intention. So, like, here's the thing. Right now, when you talk about keys, people complain about, like, well, what stops you, right? What stops you from doing keys? Right now, it's insane one-shots where the boss just kills you repeatedly. Or it's this pull where you have 17 different casters and you have to spam AoE stops on everything, right? Well, part of the reason that's the case is because your tank can just pull infinite, right? Like your tank is like, there are some times when it's in danger, but most of the time it's just never in danger. Like your tank can pull, and by your tank I mean specifically Vengeance Demon Hunter, but your tank can pull 4 different packs. And so the problem with your tank being so giga strong is that you're gonna run into like unfun ways to being capped. Like I feel like the tank not being able to pull more because he's gonna die is like the most reasonable, okay, let's stop here and fight these mobs, that doesn't really feel that bad. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's like, okay, let's say we're fighting, we pull 2 packs together, and it's like, okay, there's this 3rd pack and it's way over there. It's like, well, nowadays you can just go, oh, meta, jump over, jump, double jump, sigil of chains, triple chains, omega silence, and it's just like, you can just keep doing that and pull pack after pack after pack, right? But like now, like in, classic WoW or even like Cataclysm or whatever, like if your tank just tries to walk over there and pull that pack, it's just gonna die. Like it's just gonna get hit by melees. Like I don't think it's a matter of like they want the gameplay to be spam healing the tanks. They just want us to be throttled by your tank can't just pull 50 mobs, if that makes sense. And not always, but like sometimes. Like sometimes that's the problem. We're like, okay, our tank is gonna die if we pull another pack.
Or just finding a bigger balance towards that. Because, like, obviously that, to the worst extent, is if you're gated by how many things your tank can pull, it's just absolutely going to turn into pop all your cooldowns, get threat on everything, and then run away. Which everyone would agree, and actually, luckily, Blizzard agrees that that is dog shit, which I was actually really glad to read here.
Well, I mean, they've tried. It just feels like they've been going down this path of nonstop trying to limit the players, and we've seen this since Legion all the way till now. Like what happened in BFA? Well, they reduced everyone's or tanks threat, and they also made it so that there's fervent strikes, and they made it so that there are a lot more casts. And then you go into Shadowlands, where they added even more abilities, and they added ways like they forced players to pretty much pull all the possible mobs in the dungeon. And then in Dragonflight, you have forced packs that you had to fight in order to even spawn the boss, or like. What else did they add? They added these like specific affixes that would prevent you from pulling more than 1 or 2 packs at a time.
Yeah, door.
So it just feels like
until you pull the mini boss. Yeah, mandatory packs.
yeah,
Like,
they've been constantly going down this path of like limiting players from pulling too much, and this seems like another direction in that. Well, this seems like we're going down that direction.
well, I mean, so the biggest problem is like we're big sweaty nerds, and we're gonna optimize.
That's the biggest problem.
Especially when it comes to World of Warcraft. If we have a choice between doing like progressing or having fun, I'm going to take that fun and I'm going to insert it directly into the toilet, and I'm just going to progress further and just be miserable and complain on Twitter. So the problem is no matter what the sort of like restriction is in M+ that stops you, we're going to push it to its limits. We're going to make it miserable as players, and then we're going to complain about it, right? So it's either like, okay, let's say tank damage is a limiting factor. Well, we're going to make the tank pull 50 packs anyway. He's going to have to run around in circles, and we're going to have to create classic World of Warcraft target dummies that tank the mobs for some reason, right? Let's say if it's like there's too many casters. Well, we're just going to run 100 AoE stops, and we're just going to pull 100 casters anyway, and we're just going to literally have a weak aura and then a full list on everybody's screen, and Dorki's screen looks like a fucking cockpit. And Ellismere's, has an entire Excel spreadsheet on his screen. And then, oh, we missed one kick, we're all dead. Oh, man, these kicks suck. It's like, well, part of the reason is because we pulled 17 casters. And so it's like, but the problem is, like, it's our goal as players to go fast, right? Like, we're sitting here, we're tasked with how do we go through the dungeon as fast as possible. And unfortunately, like, no matter how they limit us, we're always just going to ram our heads into it and make it not fun. And I think the problem is, like, the reason that there's such a negative response to this tank thing is, like, well, we're thinking about Shadowlands Season 1, right? It's like, well, in Shadowlands Season 1, it was miserable because we run our hands we run our heads into the wall, and we're like, okay, our demon hunter's jumping around, this is how we pull. But then the problem is, like, okay, well, then we get to, end of Shadowlands where there's 100 kicks that we need to do. And then this sucks. And then now we're in Dragonflight Season 1, and oh my god, Ruby Life Pools the healer check. All of our healers are fucking dog shit. I hate this healer check and Ruby Life Pools. And now we're in Season 3, and now the healing is fine, and the tanking is fine, but every single mechanic one-shots us, and now we have to have Aug Evokers, and we have to have Fortitude, and we have to have shield trinkets, and it's like, I wish I had a better answer, but I just don't know. We're just boneheads, and I don't know what Blizzard can do to protect us from ourselves. And I've been kind of, like, thinking about it and cooking it up ever since I read this post. Because, like, I do agree, like, if they make tanking miserable, tanking will be miserable, and the game is going to feel like dog shit. But the problem is, like, a lot of stuff at M+ feels like dog shit right now. So it's like we're trading like a turd sandwich for, a...
What? What was the other one? Just make it up.
That was a South Park joke, right? Wasn't it a giant douche?
Yeah,
that was right. It was a turd sandwich versus a giant douche. Like that. Those are our options right now. No, like I understand. Like I feel like there's always like the two different sides, right? Like you see, like the healers want this and the tanks want this. It's like because everyone wants their class to feel good and them not to be limited. And it's like I don't know. I've been thinking, I don't know if I really have a good answer. Like, it's very, very hard. But the most important thing I think they're addressing in the next expansion is let's at least make it dog shit for as few players as possible. Like, if we're going to be boneheads in our 15s and we just want no affixes and run our heads into the wall, like, I really think that they're catering the experience to make it better for people who are, like, pushing up to 10s and, like, then trying to progress. So I think I don't know. I'm still optimistic, even though I understand everyone's concerns about the tank thing. Sorry for.
I think the problem is power creep. Like that's the real problem here. There's just too much power creep. This is kind of like an Asmongold take, right? But like, we have too many stops. We have too many defensives. Some of the buttons need to go, and I think that's like what's really causing for problems in dungeons at the moment. Because we didn't have this issue back in BFA, and it's not like tanks were dog shit in BFA. It's only more of like a now problem where we have way more stops and utility from our class, or from our Dragonflight class tree. Because back in the old tree, the mop tree, we didn't have all these defensives, all these different stops. I think it's really just like a power creep problem.
I agree. I think as well, like, everybody having 3 AoE stops each and then mobs not getting stopped when you stop them is much worse than, like, your group has, like, 3 AoE stops, but they actually work. Would be a much better... I think it was much better when it was like that. I want to also briefly tangent on Threat a little bit, because it strikes me as Threat is already a little bit annoying on beta in some spots, and I feel like it's going to get worse over the expansion as DPS scales faster than tank DPS. But I think they're probably going to be reluctant if they're trying to not incentivize kiting to buff tank threat, right? I think what they really need to add is they need to add like a bigger melee threat multiplier for tanks that maybe falls off over 10 yards or something. So like give us like 200% increased threat if we're in melee with mobs, falling off back to regular once it's outside of 10 yards or something farther away. I think if they did something like that, like they could really avoid us kiting a lot, and you could even maybe nerf tank threat as we're far away from mobs for a long time. But
that
man, it feels so bad to lose threat in melee.
Well, I mean, I feel like that comes with problems too. Like, I'm just imagining if you're in a pug group and, you know, you just try and pull one pack to the next pack, but, like, you know, as you're running to the next pack, then your Mongol Fury DPS warrior is probably just, like, blasting and getting Fred right away. But I see what you're getting at.
The problem is, like, I think why most people are concerned is that Blizzard hasn't shown an ability to, like, fix, and you know what I mean? Like, that's why everyone's so concerned about the Shadowlands Season 1 thing, is because it's like, well, when tanks are weak, what happens? Well, I mean, you still have to try and pull big. You still have to try and go fast, and then you run into threat problems. Like, you remember how much people talked about threat and, like, that sort of thing at the beginning of Shadowlands at the end of BFA? And, like, did they fix threat? You might say, oh, they changed this coefficient, but realistically, the tank can just sit in the pack and spam all their buttons, and they're in their cooldowns the whole time anyway. And, like, if anything, Demon Hunters still complain about threat because of, like, stupid bugs, but that's not really threat. Like, it's sort of like, you know, they haven't really shown any sort of, like, ability to say, like, okay, we're going to lean it towards this side, we're going to make it so this is what's restricting you, but, like, we're going to alleviate these problems. And so I think, like, as soon as we see tanks becoming the throttle again, we're going to start to see, well, you know, threat, people pulling off the tank and, you know, weird stuff, and having to kite, and like, oh, Ellie Shaman's so good it drops Earthquake, and then, you know, oh, everyone has to run out of the Earthquake immediately, and it feels terrible.
Well, I also want to hear y'all's opinion on one thing in particular, and I think this was achieved twice in this expansion really well. Once with Paladin, and I actually don't know how Demon Hunter plays right now, but this was achieved in Season 1 with Paladin, and in Season 2 with Guardian Druid, and it's something they addressed today as far as the length of certain cooldowns. How do you guys feel as tanks, or maybe healers, healing tanks, and contributing to this with your externals, of like the rotation of cooldowns? Like, you remember when Paladin had like Sentinel into like Ardent Defender into like 2 more, or it was like Ardent Defender into Sentinel, and then like he did something else, and Ardent Defender was back up, and if the pull died in like a minute and a half, you could kind of just always have some kind of massive reduction. Same thing with Druid from like Barkskin at the beginning of Incarn into all the way through your Incarn, and then you had Barkskin after, and then you did Rage of the Sleeper, and then you did Survival Instincts, then you Barkskin again. Do you guys, and then if you had any downtime, you would like have a Holy Paladin like sack you or something? Do you guys, that's something that they addressed today. Do you guys like the skill of like lining all that up and finding like little mini defensive rotations, or do you think that the game will be a bit more interesting with using cooldowns with their few and far between, less often, you use them when they really matter, rather than making sure you kind of always have something?
That is actually a pretty big change that has happened over the expansions. I mean, so it's not even about cooldowns too, actually. Like, I know you're saying it's like rotating through your cooldowns so that you don't have downtime, but it's actually mitigation that has changed a lot as well. Like, if you think about it, shield block wasn't something you kept up all the time, but nowadays, almost every mitigation is kept up permanently, whether it's demon spikes, shield block, the amount of runic power you generate, iron fur, shield of righteous, all that stuff you can basically keep up forever now, and it's kind of lost some skill expression. Because if you think back, like BFA, Pro Warriors, you have to think about your downtime when you didn't have shield block. Shield of righteous wasn't up permanently. Your runic power economy wasn't nearly as big as it is nowadays, where you kind of just like permanently in a whole Heart Strike, Death Strike loop. And same with like Demon Spikes and all. Like Demon Spikes with Demon Hunter used to be weaving in between. Like, all right, you know, you have meta to bridge the gaps between your Demon Spikes, or you would have Valbrand to bridge the gaps.
I think that's
even Brewmaster, like when they had Iron Skin Brew, you know, like that was something too. But
well, that was full uptime
nowadays.
But it was like the only one that was full
uptime too. But yeah, it is still up full time. But there was still like a little bit more management with your resources than there is nowadays, and it is definitely true that like nowadays it's more about just keeping everything up and going through your defensives.
Well, because the problem used to be that a bad prot warrior would get auto attacked with shield block down and then get killed, right? Like that was a big problem before, was that bad tanks would just get one shot because they didn't have spikes or shield block or whatever up, and they didn't know how to bridge the gaps between them with cooldowns, and they would press defensives with shield block up, and then both shield block and defensives would fall off and they would die. So Blizzard kind of over the years has adapted and given us more full uptime on defensives. And some of that is, I think, done well. Like I think for Prot Warrior, for instance, there's a good, for a while it was like, oh, you can either have full uptime on shield block with heavy repercussions talented, or you can have slightly less than full uptime if you talent into the fray instead. And you then have to, you know, play a little bit better, but if you do, there's some higher reward there, right? And like, if you can bridge the gap, that's good. But now it's kind of in the place where it's like every single tank has full uptime on their defensive, and it's like pretty free. You know, you got to take 1 point and feed the demon or whatever if you're Avengers Demon Hunter, and then bang, Spikes is up 100% of the time, which I think is better than a world where bad tanks or mediocre tanks are getting one shot. But I think that if we can move it such that that doesn't happen, then moving it instead, like getting back to not full uptime on those anymore is good. I don't know. I feel like at the end of the day, it would be a good world if it was like a really bad tank is kind of always in danger of dying and needs to get really pumped by the healer to live. A medium tank is like also dying quite a bit, but you know, still needs some healing to get healed, right? And like, but it's not, they're not getting one shot, right? They're just, their health bar is moving down more per minute than anybody else's, or than a good tank. And then a good tank is like, you know, mostly chilling, right? And like at the start of a dangerous pull, you need some help, but like if they space their defensives well, they have good uptime on active mitigation at the right times. You know, the healer isn't worried about them and is just putting spare healing into them. And I think that's like, the problem for me is that it felt like that on beta already, and it feels like now it's going to be moving more so that like good tanks are also just kind of really dying and need to get pumped a bunch, which again, that might just be my experience having played not Blood DK mostly. Like I mostly played Warrior and Paladin and stuff in the previous weeks.
Well, how has it felt healing on beta so far, Yummy TV?
I kind of want to completely derail for a second to
Great.
continue on what Dratnos said, but
sure.
So the problem is, I think that's an extension of every single like class problem that exists right now. The problem is every class isn't about like what makes you good at your class is not your decision making, but some advanced sequencing and rotation thing, right? Like it's not a matter of like, okay, I play tank, I know this mob, he looks like big dragon, I know to press big defensive, you know? It's not like making decisions about your abilities. It's literally just, here's, okay, now you know, I press this into this, into this, into this, into this, now this is up, now I get this proc, now I fill this gap. And it's like you're every single class just feels like you're playing like just mash all your buttons, sequence everything perfectly, as opposed to like actually thinking about it, right? Like it's almost once you mastered your rotation, you're just executing your rotation over and over again, and rotations are getting more and more convoluted and complicated. And it's not a matter of like, okay, I have my incarn here, but this pull is pretty easy, so I'm going to wait and then I'm going to save it for the next part because it'll let me pull 2 packs together and then I'll incarn it. It's more just like press incarn immediately when it's up. Okay, bark skin, now this, now rage of the sleeper, now this, now incarn is back up because my cooldown comes up in 30 seconds for some reason. Like I think that's the big problem when it comes to decision making. I think that extends to like every class too. In terms of healing on beta, I don't know. It's hard because everyone's always like testing builds and stuff. I just feel like damage in general is just way too big and spiky. Like I don't really feel like I need to put a ton of globals into tanks, but like yeah, there are some mobs that just cut the tank down and kill, like do 80% of its health. And to me, I don't even see that as like a healing thing. That's just like that's what the mob does, and that's how to me not. I mean, I don't know if tanks find that fun, but it's not really like a healer thing. You know, like they just have to press the right buttons and live.
Yeah, it really isn't much of a healer thing.
I think it could be an interesting. Like healers are like, okay, well, I'm gonna need sack right now to bridge until my next cooldown. Imagine there's like less cooldowns, and it's more like, hey, I'm gonna need you to fucking spam me for the next 15 seconds because I don't have anything, and then like you would need to work that into your kit, and that would feel awful without comms, and again bridging the gap between the good and the bad player. But like with comms, that would be like, that's a way to solve a problem. Yelling at your healer that you're going to need healing soon is a similar thing than just pressing a button or asking for sack, right? And it's potentially more involved. I just don't know if that's how healers want to heal. I guess it would kind of function like a large hard-hitting dot on someone in the group. I don't know if that happens in dungeons a lot. That's probably how it would feel to heal that.
It's hard because like, so from my POV of healing at least, you know, like back when I healed, I don't mind tank healing, especially like healing Brewmaster. I've always found it kind of fun healing Brewmaster. I used to like heal Trance's Brewmaster back in BFA, and it would be enjoyable. But the problem with it nowadays is every role is too involved. And what I mean by that is like, when you look at pulls back then, it'd be like, okay, you know, there's this pull where there's like a lot of tank damage going on, right? So you just spam your tank, and everything else is pretty chill. Then there's this pull, which might have a lot of group damage. So that's like where you start spreading your hots and doing group healing. And the problem now is you have so many encounters where there's everyone involved. The tank is getting destroyed, the group is getting destroyed, there's like swirlies all over the floor, and there's like multiple kicks that the group has to deal with. And probably the healer has to usually deal with stuff too, right? Like you would have to be weaving in an in-cap roar in between or trying to get a kick. And I think that's when it's too much. Like I'm thinking about Ruby Life pools, for example. If you're having to spot heal your tank in Ruby Life pools, there's no fucking shot, man. Like you're too busy trying to heal everyone else. In fact, even in TGP, I've had this discussion with my group, and like the first boss, for example, is like the first boss actually completely rails the tank. So like I'm like, yo, Elsmer, can you like spot heal me during like this part? But it's like, how the hell is he gonna spot heal me when he has to be keeping the group alive? And I think that's pretty problematic. It'd be fine if it was more like, all right, you know, there's like less emphasis on the group at this part and less emphasis on the tank and another part, but that's just not how it is at the moment.
It just comes down to what limits you, right? And I feel like it takes just a lot of love and care and design to make it so, you know, oh, this area is really tough on the tank, so we need to pull one pack at a time unless we have a reason to make our tank really tanky, or he has a big cooldown, and then, oh, this area is, you know, lots of different kicks and we need to like figure out the kicks here. It just feels like everything is just kind of mashed together. And one trend, and I kind of tweeted about this, but one trend I'm seeing is it feels like they just want to put unavoidable AoE damage into everything. Like I'm just seeing these bosses that have multiple abilities that do AoE damage. Like it's not even, okay, this one ability goes off every 25 seconds. It's like 2 different abilities on a cycle that do AoE. Like for instance, the first boss in Arakara or whatever, and the last boss in that dungeon too. Like they added one AoE group pulse that's like, nah, that's not enough. Let's do another one. Like they added the spiders that do that slam that's just like an unavoidable stun and AoE damage. Like the problem is I feel like they're trying to add that everywhere, but now if they want the healer to be like healing the tank and the tank to require healing, like they have to walk some of this other stuff back, and they can't have all these kicks and support things that the healer has to do and this AoE healing and, you know, be expected to heal the tank. I mean, I don't know, it's hard to say. Like I just have to play it and see how it feels. My biggest concern is that in Season 1, because they do regular tuning, you know, after a week or two, I think the dungeons will feel fine. But then, you know, what happens in Season 2 or 3? I think we're going to get something similar to Dragonflight, where Season 1 is, like, pretty diverse and feels good. But then, as soon as they start working on other stuff and they're not, like, putting a lot of attention into the dungeons, it's just going to feel like crap again.
I'm a little dubious of Season 1, just because, like, going into Dragonflight Season 1, even with all the class and spec trees, like, the game was pretty balanced. Like, in beta. Like, months out of the expansion. And this time, it's, like, the tuning right now is complete nonsense. So, like, I hope I'm wrong, but like I just can't even foresee a world where like season 1 comes out and the game is like giga well tuned like it was in the first season of Dragonflight. It's just so far off.
I mean, I'm not saying it'll be when it comes out, but I'm saying like I think they're gonna do more regular tuning and changes. I mean, that was one of the big things that they did in Dragonflight season 1, and everyone was like, "Oh wow, like this is a new Blizzard. This is a new thing." I don't remember class. I do agree with you that class balance was much better, but in terms of dungeons, like there was literally weekly tuning of dungeons. If anyone remembers that in the first like 2 months.
Yeah, and then we thought that was just what it was. Yeah, it just stopped happening.
Was a season 1 only thing.
That is kind of sad to think about.
All right, I think we did we get our yap out on the dungeons? The tanks?
I think that's probably sufficient yapping. Fronk will love
I
editing.
guess one thing I wanted to ask before this is, when did they change tanks to be self-reliant?
Yeah, I'm gonna keep yapping. So I was listening to you talk about this.
Okay.
I actually think it's been a slow decline since BFA. I mean, I didn't play from Legion and Beyond, but tanks in BFA, the problem is like every expansion had this borrowed power. So by the end of the expansion, yeah, tanks were really tanky, but like early in BFA, tanks needed a lot of healing. Maybe not like always all the time. No, you played
in Blood Decay in season 1.
I mean, in season 2, you healed. I mean, when warriors had Vision of Perfection or whatever, or like conflict when they could root all the mobs, like there was weird power creep and like verse stacking where they didn't need healing, but tanks needed healing for a lot of BFA. Maybe not like spam healing like it is in Cataclysm, but you know they needed a lot of healing. And then even in Shadowlands, it wasn't.
But that was only because Pro Warrior was meta, right?
I would say every tank needed healing. The problem is, okay, so I made this video in BFA, and it was like how to heal every tank. And it explained when tanks were strong and when they were weak. And back then it was like, you know, okay, Vengeance Demon Hunter, like, it has demon spikes, and if it has meta, it can use that and bridge the gap in a pull. But if it doesn't have meta, then once they run out of spikes, they need healing. But nowadays, it's just like Demon Hunter just fully has everything up all the time. Feldev gives them meta, like... It's the same thing with, like, I don't know, every single class is just in their cooldowns permanently 24/7. I feel like in BFA, maybe it wasn't true that you needed to, like, for instance, Bear, right? Like, Bear, if you popped Incarn in BFA, yeah, you'd be invulnerable, and you could do, like, enormous-ass pulls, but if your Incarn wore out...
Incarn was dog shit back then.
No, dude, no, ain't no way.
In BFA, Incarn was weak as fuck.
No, ain't no way. I'm telling you that you would pop Incarn, you would do these big pulls, you would need 0 healing, and then like if you needed to keep tanking mobs and you needed to be in there, then it'd be like, okay, I gotta pump massive healing, especially like those high freeholds and stuff. Oh yeah, I feel like you had to do a lot of tank healing in BFA.
I feel like tanks have felt really similar from BFA till now. At least since I stopped playing. So BFA.
That's what Dorki says too. But I feel like I don't know. I'm interested if other healers are listening.
But the thing is it could like healers could have been more conditioned to heal tanks back then, and that slowly changed over time. But it felt the same for us, and we would actually not know, right?
Yeah, I guess maybe. Yeah, it's funny. Dorki was talking about needing heals. Like, dude, you don't heal the tank at all this season. I feel like you almost never heal a tank, like at least relative to BFA. Like I'm not saying you heal the tank 0, but I feel like I'm healing the tank probably 20% of the amount that I would heal it in BFA in terms of like globals that I use on the tank.
Like the current Vengeance Demon Hunter and then Bear when it was broken both had absurd defensive scaling with target count, right? Which is like really OP for keys.
Yep. That's a whole nother problem.
That's like that was the primary offender is the Vengeance Demon Hunter 4 set and Bear like Blood Frenzy in season 2. Like those two effects made it so that every single person you were fighting made you tankier, and you'd get past a certain point, and it's just like you're actually happier to add mobs to the pull. It makes you even harder to kill, which that shouldn't be a thing. So I think one big lesson they should learn from Dragonflight is make sure you design those things to be like soft capped at 5 targets or whatever, how many things it'll give you defense
you
from.
Dratnos, guys. Target cap.
Target cap them. That's right.
That's what Dratnos wants.
That's right. That's what we need.
First.
Target capping is a necessity for the game.
That's right.
I mean, that would kind of go in a way of
that would work.
Yeah, just they just re-hard cap everybody at 5. Then we
what if they
never
cap every spec?
Very hard-fisted way to do what they want to do.
Yeah, log in. No, I just mean the defensive effects need to stop scaling past a certain number of targets. That is crazy.
Let's just run 2 Augs now. Fuck it.
Yeah, or that.
Fuck it. Hey, Growl, you know what's funny? You say that like you don't need healing tanks nowadays, or you do way less. But like, I was just overhearing how Yoda and Drogoh are getting into like really heated arguments about like him not healing him, and like he's been like dying in some of these areas, and Drogo's just not healing him. So maybe it's just like
I'm telling you don't heal tanks.
Well, maybe it's just because like the healers nowadays are more conditioned to not heal the tank. Like, that could also just be
the
it.
case.
Have healers gotten more stupid over time?
Ooh, that's a tough one because healers are always very stupid. So
it seems like the average definitely got worse sometime around BFA. I don't know. Somebody started playing, and it just seemed to kind of.
It seems like the average went down. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And just to avoid confusion, we're now going into the original recorded episode.
All right, it's episode 34 of the PoddyC, unless Fronk didn't update the number again like he does sometimes to make me look foolish, which I don't think he has this time. So either way, I don't know, episode 34 maybe of the PoddyC. We've got the full gang back together. No Growl this week, we're sorry. I guess first thing to mention, Dorki, the TGP Cup last weekend didn't go your way. We're very sorry for you.
Congrats to you guys though, Mr. Dratnos team.
Yeah, there was steep competition. If you guys missed it in the TGP over the weekend, for battling for the last spot and for the global finals was the heralded Dratnos guild team, and then also Hope with Dorki, and then a bunch of my players and Ellesmere, and y'all got knocked out. But you're free. You're free though now.
That's right. There was only 2 possible outcomes out of that tournament for us. It was either we win or we win.
Yeah, either
the thing we won.
Yeah, I had that same feeling because like we were partying it over the weekend, and I know in the past I have felt whenever I've had my guildies or friends vying for a spot, I've felt that stress because I know they cared and like they really wanted it. And I knew that everyone on that team would be genuinely just as happy to be done as they would be to make the finals. So in that last map, I wasn't like my heartstrings weren't being pulled out trying to root for them. It was like, I don't know, man. I mean, if they luse, they'll probably feel great. So that's fine. Dratnos, why do you have red tape on your arms as well? Sorry, it's distracting.
I gave blood today, so I got some. I try to give blood whenever I'm off CD2, and then I did one today where I gave platelets, so that's a 2-arm procedure, and then they goofed one of these, so they had to go in through here, so that's why I've got 3 bandages on.
All right, let us know in the comments. Do you guys think Dratnos is trying to score points here, and like he specifically scheduled it on this day?
Knowing I scheduled it on today, knowing that you would post today at 7 p.m. going to have to record tonight or tomorrow night when we don't normally record on a Tuesday. Tuesday is very much not a normal recording day for us.
True. That's a spoiler.
Yeah. But anyways, I knew you would do that. So I gave blood today. I didn't even have to give blood as well. I could have just gotten these bandages. You don't know. There's no proof.
Oh yeah, you could just be making shit up.
That could be it.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, if you're not afraid of needles, I recommend it. It's fun. You get some free snacks. I got an umbrella today as well.
Dorki, what was your TGP experience? Do you feel, is it the same thing as usual where like you finish and you're like, there's no way I'm doing this again, and then you'll just do it again? Or are you ready to do it again after a break?
Well, it's a little bit different this time because next round is going to be MDI, right? Like assuming it's going with the whole MDI TGP rotation. So assuming it's MDI and assuming it's those dungeons, you guys know what the dungeons I'm talking about. It might not be a very good MDI experience.
The new ones, right?
Yeah.
You know, those dungeons. I mean, that could be a topic. I mean, that it is like, I know every expansion it's been like, oh man, these dungeons seem to be getting a little bit more, and this time I feel like it's the biggest step they've ever taken.
Yeah, it's crazy. I was actually doing some dungeons with Dratnos was it last night?
Yeah, I think it was last night. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sad we didn't do Mist of Tyrannus Life, man. I mean, that was such a classic dungeon. Mist of Tyrannus Life. I mean, that dungeon was like pretty outdated and came out like back in like what 2020 or some shit like that. It's been quite a while ago, and they had to do some major revamping with that dungeon to modernize it and give it a little bit more flavor. Because there's no way, like, players would be satisfied with the lack of mechanics in the Shadowlands dungeon.
Yeah, exactly. It would have felt like a classic dungeon.
Add more to it. Right.
Yeah.
I have another thought, and it kind of is based on that, even though I actually agree with you. It's more of a deeper question. Will Mythic Plusers ever be happy?
Absolutely not.
Like, is there
That's
a world...
the biggest thing I've learned.
Is there a world where, like, is there one of these alternate realities where Mythic Plusers are actually just content and happy with what's going on?
Nah.
I think that it's one of those cases of, like, they're always going to complain, but this time they're
like
right
PvP.
to. You know?
Well,
it's like...
I mean, we kind of went over it the other week, but... I mean, I guess if you're a high Mythic Pluser, you should be happy just from the general idea that Blizzard is balancing and creating a mode for you for the first time. That should be true. But man, I was thinking about it the other day. Like, you get these cool little boons or whatever, and then they go away, and now every week is push week, and there's no affixes. It's always fortified and tyrannical, but the keys scale a little harder than they did before, and deaths are even more of a setback. And I'm just looking at it, and I could be wrong, and I hope I'm wrong, but it sounds like I think people are going to dislike Mythic Plus in this expansion more than they do now, even though this is the first time it's been designed for them. And I don't know how to deal with that, or if that's wrong.
Weird, because there's another really big change that hasn't been talked about enough, is the whole how you deal with mobs. Because mobs have just been stopped for all of Dragonflight. I mean, so we've been through many different phases, right? Like, Legion was the phase where all you do is you mass pull, you AoE CC, and then you kite, and the mobs don't do anything. And then we had, like, BFA, where they tried to cut down on that, where they reduced aggro, they added fervent strikes, which would attack targets if the tank was out of range. That way it's to, like, prevent tanks from just kiting. And then we went to, like, a Shadowlands and more Dragonflight meta where we're just using stops. So, like, instead of kiting the mobs, we would just stop the mobs with, like, a bunch of AoE stops. And now they're, like, going back on that, and they're making it so that if you try to use stops on mobs, they'll just recast. And it's been such a weird dynamic. It makes it so that, like I kind of agreed with their philosophy behind making stops less impactful, just because stops were insane in Dragonflight. But it makes it so that you're either, like, forced to deal with these mechanics, or you have, like, holes that you can't just go as big because you're dealing with, like, 3 mobs that would just chain cast over and over and over, and there's just, like, not much else you can do about it. So I'm not too sure how I feel about the direction. I feel like on one hand it's good, but on the other hand, it depends on the tuning entirely.
Yeah, that was the biggest thing for me, for sure, doing the keys. Well, the one thing I noticed was, oh my god, we've depleted by so much because we have 20 deaths, and, like, you could kind of time keys in Dragonflight with 20 deaths if you were fast, and there's no way you can do that with 15 seconds each. But the other thing was definitely, like, there were a lot of mechanics where I would see the mob casting it, and I'd be like, okay, I'm going to stun that thing, right? Like, I'm going to shield charge that thing, stun it, it's not going to cast, and then it comes out of its stun and it starts casting again. It's like, oh, right, that doesn't work anymore. Which, if it was, like, there were some pulls where it's like a tank buster. I was playing tank in these dungeons, and if it was, like, a mob that was just casting, like, a thing that kills your tank, and then you try and stop it, and then it just does it anyways, and it's like, I don't know, man, maybe some of these pulls were supposed to kite, or maybe I'm just using my defensives bad or something. It felt wrong, but that's maybe that kind of thing where it just, like, you'll get used to it. But to me, that is more than the removal of affixes, more than the 15-second death penalty, maybe equal with everything always being tyrannical. Every boss always being tyrannical is so real bad.
So bad, yeah.
That's like ooh, man. Like, we talk about wanting health to scale faster than damage in dungeons, but, like, for trash, not for bosses, we want that more. For bosses, it's like, that's okay. That's okay. That doesn't have to happen the tyrannical way. It could be equal or something.
I mean, shouldn't they consider that, though? Like, if they're saying, hey, we want to curate a high key experience for the first time, I feel like that's the first thing they should address. That is something where, like, it's always been lost in translation when people are complaining about tyrannical. Because when you're looking at a 10, which is what they designed for, Tyrannical isn't super oppressive at all.
Right, it's great. I think it's more fun. Like if you're doing a weekly like +8 or something, +6, fortify, like if there's no Tyran, the bosses die so fast that you don't get to see all their mechanics and stuff, right? And it's like, oh, this is kind of bad, right? But then Tyran actually, like, it feels okay in those groups. Obviously, like there are some groups that are low damage that for whom Tyrannical is maybe going to suck there as well. But like in a lot of groups, in a lot of lower key groups, you do actually have more than enough to overpower the bosses. It's just, you know, like the coordination of the trash and stuff is hard. And so Tyran kind of feels natural. It makes the dungeon feel right, where the bosses are like the right level of difficulty. But then, yeah, the super high keys, it just turns into a scaling nightmare. And I'm not looking forward to that being always on. But really the stops for me is the biggest, like, these trash pulls.
That seems
so
to be
harsh.
the number one complaint, I think, from Mythic Plusers is like, hey, this is a direction we don't want to go in. But I do think if they're looking to design High Mythic Plus for High Mythic Plusers, I think almost one of the first things you would do is the infinite scaling issue with bosses, especially with phases, is something that would have to be like completely eliminated in some way. Either like give bosses an enrage that's a reasonable amount of time or something, and like lowering their health. I don't know, but like some different thing. I actually kind of wanted to ask you guys how complete dungeons feel. We're like, are we 5 weeks away from the expansion? I can tell you that.
Yeah.
I can tell you there's something I'm going to get to eventually that I think is like historically kind of not up to par yet. But the raid in testing, this is like a normal testing cycle. It generally feels well put together. The dungeon journal makes sense. It's not like, oh my god, the expansion's about to come out and the raid is in this state. It feels pretty close to done. How does Mythic Plus, how do dungeons feel? Do dungeons feel complete? Like, obviously, it's kind of hard to imagine complete as far as where Blizzard sees it, because you guys might be like, well, it's not complete because they're not removing all these dog shit mechanics, but Blizzard might be intending to do that, so that's not something they want to remove. Like, how complete do dungeons feel this close to the expansion as opposed to, like, previous expansions?
Not at all, actually. Like, I'm not even talking about tuning or, like, all that stuff, or, like, you know, getting rid of stops and mechanics, etc. It feels like they're in this situation at the moment where they're trying to figure out what they want to do with some of the bosses. Some of the newer bosses, they've been either bug fixing them or like adding mechanics, and I just don't know how they're supposed to interact. So like one of the examples is Stone Vaults, the dual boss. There's like a boss where there's like a caster and a tank buster guy, and they've changed up the spell queuing on that fight multiple times. They've changed up how the mechanics worked multiple times. And it seems like they haven't figured out how they want to make that fight. Because right now it makes no sense at all. There's supposed to be this mechanic where you're supposed to like hide an event. And then like a box is supposed to come and it's supposed to like explode and shoot out lava waves. But there's like no possible place where you can even dodge the lava waves. And I've tried figuring out with like a bunch of other players, and we couldn't figure out like how the mechanic's supposed to work at all, or like what the hell are we even supposed to do in this fight. So like in terms of like just like mechanics and like how the dungeons function, it feels very incomplete and maybe even buggy. I don't even know.
Yeah, the disparity in difficulty between some pulls in some of these dungeons as well, like Grimbatol, there are some pulls you can do where it's like, you know, you fight one pack by itself and it's really, really hard. And then there's some mobs in there that kind of don't do anything. And that, I mean, it's kind of always true, like in every dungeon, right? There's some hard mobs and some not, but the disparity seems pretty high still. So I don't know. I'm not sure if I would say they feel very incomplete. I wouldn't be surprised if they make it live pretty close to how they are right now, but it does seem, there are also some fights that are like definitely still not working the way that they're eventually gonna, right? Like, it definitely still feels like beta running these dungeons. It doesn't yet feel like
it doesn't feel like
raid testing felt like raid testing pretty much felt like these are bosses, right? Like these are ready to go, you know.
With the exception of Silken Court, yeah.
Right, like aside from the case of like how are you supposed to do this, right? But like if you did Silken Court on the lower difficulties, right? Like that felt like that was just like
it felt like a complete fight. Yeah.
Right, exactly. Like that felt like pretty close to ready for them to push the launch button on, and it doesn't feel quite there yet, I'd say, for the dungeons, at least for some of them. I think Necrotic Wake is pretty close, although you still can't use half your abilities in the Necropolis. I don't know if you remember back in Shadowlands, you couldn't do that.
Oh, it's so bad.
And now there are augmentation
wow.
evokers that cannot press Breath of Eons up in the Necropolis. It doesn't work unless you're playing. If you're playing one of the hero talents, you get your it's steerable, so it works. But if you're playing the other one, it's targeted and it doesn't work. It's really funny.
Okay, so I mean, I guess
That bug lasted all of Shadowlands though, so.
I guess they have 5 weeks, and then they have 2 weeks, and then they have a week of Heroic Week where I think they will probably just be Mythic Zeros. I'm not positive. And then it's like, that's when they need to be ready. The reason I'm asking you this is I think there's another part of the game right now that is historically not accurate, and it is class balance. And in a way, class design, they like actually went through and for a bunch of classes made really good changes, but there's some classes right now that are doom and gloom. So like Enhanced Shaman, down bad. They were like the next class on the list to like get that fresh touch of paint, the no 2-pointers thing. It seems like they're getting left there. They're not. That's an 11.0.5 situation. Rogues seem to be in complete disarray as far as I can tell. Like they don't like any of their hero talents. They feel kind of left behind. Demon Hunters, I don't know, feel as left behind. They also have like bad hero talents, but also they have this weird problem where they're like significantly less fun to play than they are currently on live, which is a weird thing to kind of get over. But I'm referring to the actual tuning. Like the tuning of WoW right now is the most Mickey Mouse made up shit I've ever seen in my life. Like going into Dragonflight, just talking purely like where your raid buffs were coming from in your raid, what your DPS comp looked like, what your tank comp looked like for Mythic Razagath, which is what we kind of planned everything around, the first boss of an expansion, right? 2 months out, we were doing a ton of raid damage testing on our own on PTR or beta, and we felt confident that we knew what class was good at what, and nothing changed from then into the release, and we ran the exact same comp we came up with 2 months before release. And every class that was good at what it was good at what it was good at, that stayed the same, and just things minorly moved up and down, and we ran the same comp. Right now, we're 5 weeks away, not 8. And if I were to, like, if anyone were to try to make a guess of comp prediction right now, you would just be making it the fuck up. It would be totally random. There are tanks that take infinite damage. There are tanks that do no damage. There are DPS classes that 50% of their power is coming from their hero talent tree, and they do 50% more damage than every other spec. And then there's classes where their hero talent trees don't do anything. Like, it's just completely made up nonsense. And it's that's something to me where I don't think they're going to push the expansion because of it. But that's the one part of the game that feels very not complete at the moment, like astonishingly so. And maybe a lot of people don't realize it because there's like certain times you look at this stuff. I feel like for a lot of people, they wait until it's closer to the expansion to really think about this. We're like, we're on it way ahead of time because we have to be. So I'm just sounding the alarm now from someone who's spending a lot of time looking into this, and it might be obvious to a lot of you that it is completely screwed. I don't know if you guys have any input on that or if you've seen similar things.
There definitely feel like there are some classes and specs that like there's no way they could make it live like this, and they've been in a state like Arcane Mage, for instance. If you just look at it is being actively iterated on is the thing, but like there is a 0% chance that Arcane Mage will make it to live working like it currently does. And I don't think it got changed in the last beta build. Maybe it was the one before. Maybe it was the last one actually as well. I don't know. And it has been getting a lot of changes. It's just like, I don't know. I mean, how much time do they need to, like, how many of the classes are in a place where that is true for them? Like, for instance, for Arcane right now, it's a damage loss to take your bottom hero talent point, which is pretty goofy, pretty Mickey Mouse thing to be true for any spec. So, like, how many of the classes are in that state versus are just in a state where it's like, oh, this tank needs a 30% increase in its armor value and a 20% increase in its auto attack damage or whatever, and then it's going to be fine. Like those sorts of things. Could they do all of that in the last few weeks? Plausibly, right? Like they didn't in the past, but plausibly that could happen in the final weeks of beta. Versus how many classes are we looking at where it's like, oh, I'm Enhancement Shaman and I still have a really icky spec tree that like I really like to see changed. I'm Arcane Mage and I'm going to get reworked and I hope it's good and I hope they have enough time to test it after reworking it, right? I think that's to me the important variable is like if it's only a couple of specs that are in that need to be reworked rather than tuned space, I think it's okay this far out, but it is definitely concerning because as we get closer and closer to launch, the chances are getting higher and higher that stuff is just going to get left in a bad way.
Like, I've been trying to tell me and the other officers, like, hey guys, let's just still wait on this damage testing. Let's still wait on really thinking about what comps would be good. But it's getting close to the point where you have to tell people what characters they're playing. And it's like, at some point, you're just going to have to start thinking that the game could go live like this. And that's just such a crazy and scary thought. And I'm thinking about what they're actually even making. Like, Season 1 of Dragonflight kind of famously is like the most balanced season ever. Right? And that was right after they implemented these super complicated new class and spec trees. This time, their undertaking is significantly less than that with hero talents. I guess maybe you could give them a little credit, and I feel like they have almost made class and spec trees again. This beta cycle, they just kind of just redid them on top of the hero talent trees, and maybe that's what it is. But it seems like hero talents are actually the majority of the discrepancy right now. Like, if you see a class it's owning, it's most likely because their hero talents are correct. And if you see a class doing 0 damage, it's most likely because their hero talents are awful. But maybe it's because they've been spending so much time on the class and spec tree. And maybe clearly recently they've moved more into the tuning phase of beta. So like maybe in 3 weeks, and especially we have a heroic week this time, right? Like heroic week is the great equalizer. You can fix anything majorly problematic before like the real season starts, you know? So
yeah, didn't they used to always do like a tuning pass that it came out on, they announced the notes on the Friday of heroic week, and then the Tuesday of mythic week it would actually get implemented?
Also, what's interesting is the last couple times there were heroic weeks, so before Dragonflight, because of the race, they like did very minor notes. Where they like, and with the intention of as minor as they could, like unless something was majorly broken, because they just didn't want to upset like the effort that people put into preparing a specific thing just to have it like completely unusable or a random thing to be super broken. But I don't know if they're gonna have the luxury to do that this time, because I just don't. I've never seen this is unheard of. If you guys are, not everyone is like super locked into what the game looks like in beta before it comes out. This is completely unheard of. This is like every other expansion that I've ever prepared for is 10 times more tuned than this months ago. This is like a completely uncharted territory thing, so I just don't know exactly where it's going to end up.
Yeah, Max, you were saying how they've been focusing on changing up the class and spec trees too, so like it's more than just taking on the hero talent tree. But I think that's also part of the problem. Like they haven't been touching some of the spec trees enough. Like I'm thinking specifically
like Druid,
Havoc Demon, yeah, Druids.
Like every
Havoc
Druid
Demon
spec
Hunter,
is terrible right now. They're
Rogues.
all awful.
Yeah, because like these classes, they actually need some of their changes that they didn't get in Dragonflight, but because like because they were working on the hero talent tree too, it might be like too much for them to juggle. At least with how much power there is in hero trees at the moment. I was kind of surprised by how much power is behind these hero talent trees, because initially I was thinking, oh, hero talent trees, like, what are they going to be like? Yeah, like maybe even not even like maybe it'll just be like 5 to 15 if anything.
Like flavor almost.
But right, we were thinking it'd be more of like a thematic thing, but it ended up being pretty transformative for some specs. Like some specs, you're looking at anywhere from like 20 to 30, if not even 40% of your class comes from that talent tree, and it's kind of ridiculous. So it's probably a lot for them to juggle at the moments between the class tree, spec tree, and hero tree.
Yeah, I will say it's weird to me. Like when hero talents first were announced, it made sense to me that most of them focused on like 1 or 2 abilities, and they didn't add a lot of buttons. And like that means that it's not going to button bloat us. It's not going to. I think Frostfire Mage was kind of the opposite of this, where you looked at it and you're like, oh my god, I have to learn like 10 new interactions to understand how this works, right? But every other hero talent tree is basically like, hey, I'm about Thunderclap, and like you press Thunderclap, it good. And that made sense to me. But then the fact that there is now like, hey, I'm about Thunderclap, and also I do 40% of your damage, right? Like that really is moving a lot of specs into just, you know, you open up their details breakdown on beta, and it's like, oh yeah,
Same.
50% of my damage is coming from one button, the button that my hero talent empowers, and that does strike me as like bad. Like I think it should be a lot less.
It's objectively bad.
Yeah.
It is bad. I think any class ever where like a large percentage of your damage is coming from one thing, especially something that you don't really interact with, is I mean that's just kind of not fun. So it makes sense. Tying this all together, I know recently we talked about, maybe this was 10 episodes ago, it's not super recent. We talked about like how popular we think the War Within would be. And like I actually was like pretty high on it. I was saying, you know, I think this is, I actually had a theory based on the sub numbers they released that it's actually just like an every other expansion thing. Like every other expansion, people kind of get their like, oh man, it would be really fun to play WoW again thing. And they just don't do it every expansion. It's like an every other thing that actually goes back for a while and tracks. It's like before this, it would have been Shadowlands. And then 2 expansions before that, it would have been Legion. And 2 expansions before that, it would have been MoP. Right? Like there's just these like, well, I guess MoP famously kind of underplayed expansion, but a super banger. But I was thinking like that was going to kind of come around here. Also, it was the star of the show at BlizzCon. Like the hype for War Within at BlizzCon and the few months after was huge. Like I imagine I know a lot of people kind of outside the WoW space that were really excited about playing WoW. I haven't heard that in a while. I don't know if it's going to release at a time where there's like a lot going on. Like for example, a worst case scenario would have it to have released in June with like Elden Ring DLC and all these other things going on. I don't know what else is coming out in August. And maybe this is something where they haven't ramped up their marketing yet, so people haven't had a chance to be like, all right, man, where are my friends at? Like, I can't wait to play this. But I guess maybe just revisiting this topic with you all, how do you foresee the hype around the War Within currently? Because it's kind of hard to see as someone in the WoW community, because like current Season 4 remix and all that stuff, apparently Season of Discovery, the last phase, came out last Thursday. I wouldn't have been able to even tell you that. I didn't hear a peep about it, right?
Oh,
so, like,
yeah.
So like where are you guys at with like the current hype with WoW, and then how you guys think it'll go in the War Within?
I think the Twitch numbers kind of reflect, especially for the Season of Discovery that you brought up. Like it was kind of shocking how Phase 4, which is supposed to be, you know, the patch, it's the level 60 patch, right? It's like the end game of Classic, is somehow not generating much buzz. And like you said, I didn't even know about it too much myself. It's just it happened all of a sudden, and the usual Classic streamers aren't even like really that into it, and that kind of like goes to show a lot. But also I've noticed that with War Within beta, normally in these like at this stage of beta cycle, there would be a whole lot more, not just viewership but like engagement. I've noticed that with Shadowlands, I've noticed that with Dragonflight.
Dragonflight was super huge engagement. It was like
it was big.
Popping off, yeah.
And that was like not even 5 weeks ago, or not even 5 weeks before Dragonflight launched. I would say like a whole month or 2 before Dragonflight launch. It was kind of getting hyped up, and I'm not too sure where that is exactly with War Within at the moment. Like maybe it's gonna ramp up over the next few weeks, but I haven't really noticed that as much.
Yeah, that's kind of where I left that. Like I felt like it hasn't seemed to like generate that buzz. Like I'll give you an example. I average more viewers now than I did going into Dragonflight beta. And in Dragonflight beta, if I were to do a stream that was just talking about a specific class with some people from that class, I would get like 7K viewers on Twitch for something like that. I haven't done that really this beta cycle, but I can tell you just from how I think my channel normally goes, I would be getting like 3K at the most. So you're talking like half, and my channel's bigger than it used to be, right? So I think in a ways a lot of that is indicative of like the current hype around the expansion. It just hasn't like really hit people yet, and I'm not really sure exactly why that is. Shadowlands super weird, still in COVID, right? So like people were super aware of that. Dragonflight, we were kind of getting out of COVID around the release period, or like out of the everyone's at home all the time phase of it. I'm just wondering, there's been hype for games. People are hyped in the gaming community for games. Look at like the hype that Elden Ring DLC generated, right? That doesn't feel this way for the War Within, and I find it unlikely to really pop off in the next month. But also, I haven't really seen huge advertisement for it, and I think, but WoW is a very normie-driven game as far as hype and buzz is concerned, certainly. And you're not going to get that without like a huge marketing campaign. And to my knowledge, I don't think I've seen anything like that. So. Maybe they're holding until a little closer to the thing. Because like, are there any competing games coming out in that month? Are you guys aware of anything in our universe where like people usually play games? Like the Diablo season's coming out
early. It's like
early.
August 8th or something, yeah, earlier.
And not the expansion
that's
version.
Weird.
Right,
the
it's just Season 5.
Yeah, exactly. The expansion's coming out after. That's in the universe. I'm not aware of any like RPG games that are super looked forward to.
Right now, at least, there's Final Fantasy 14 Dawn Trail just released like
that one ago,
I think, and there's gonna be the raid release coming out in like over the next 2-3 weeks, I believe.
Okay.
Somewhere around there. Like I think next week is supposed to be like the normal raid or whatever, and then 2 or 3 weeks after that is supposed to be the mythic raid.
Do you guys think there's a lot of crossovers still between Final Fantasy and WoW?
I think so.
I would say so.
I think
More
there
so
was
than other games.
like clearly in Shadowlands there was like massive crossover. It seemed like everyone was giving Final Fantasy a try if they hadn't. I think in the last 2 years since then, 2.5, 3 years, I think people have like learned what they liked and have kind of either like just decided with one of them. I don't know how many people. I mean, I know there's a lot of people that just jump around to different MMOs and stuff like that, but and then they're very, very different games for most people. Like if you think about raiding, I think they're actually kind of similar-isk and like the type of people that play them and why. But playing each game casually, I think, is massively different than the other, right? Like it's so story driven in Final Fantasy.
Yeah.
So like you're saying, like okay, maybe the raid comes out, people have already gotten through the Dawn Trail story, or give them a few more weeks to, and then they like kind of cap that off with the raid, and then it's a while till the next content, and then it's the WoW release, right? So like it'll kind of come back. I don't know. I just like, is that the vibe? Like, are you guys? My vibe before was War Within is gonna be like a fucking monumental moment and it's going to be a hype. I was super high on the release of it and I have been coming off of that lately because it seems like that traction just really isn't there now. But I don't... Go ahead.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
No, you go. No, you go. No. No, you go, Dorki. No, you go.
What was I even going to say? I forgot. oh yeah. I remember now.
No,
yeah.
you
go. Yeah. So.
All right. So.
Oh, you go, Dorki.
It just feels a lot like Warfare is feeling almost like
Dorki, fucking come on, man, get it out. Let's go.
It's starting to feel like Dragonflight 2. Yeah. It's feeling like Dragonflight continuation for some players. Like I feel like if you're if you're playing Havoc Demon Hunter, for example, like I keep using Havoc Demon Hunter, but goddamn, I feel bad for that spec. It feels like you're just playing a continuation of Dragonflight, and you're not really getting anything new, at least like not a whole lot. And just in the game itself too, unless you're like more of a casual player, chances are you're mostly just gonna be like doing mostly the same thing, and you're just playing mostly the same class. It definitely feels a little bad in that sense.
I think that kind of thing probably doesn't matter too much for like the general expansion hype stuff, though. Like I feel looking at War Within, delves seem like they should be a really big way to pull in normies to WoW. Like that seems like it should capture a lot of the set of the player base for whom organizing a consistent 5 people to play M+ with or group to raid with, like delves, is just like, oh yeah, I can do this whenever I want. I can do that with my friends. Like that sort of thing, even if they actually suck as content, which maybe they will, I'm not convinced either way on that one yet, but like Blizzard should be able to sell that, right? Like if you think about before we played Torghast, what people thought about Torghast was pretty positive in a lot of cases, and like delves, I don't know, the premise of that should at least be able to drive the expansion, I think, a little bit. So I agree. Like maybe I just haven't been seeing the advertising. Maybe it hasn't started yet. Maybe it's targeted at different people.
Well, I'm aware of some campaigns. Like I know that it's going to start, and it hasn't. Those things haven't happened yet. It's just like, but maybe I'm really glad you brought up Torghast. They, like, the thing is though with Torghast is Torghast got announced, and then Torghast got released on beta, and then you got everyone that ever played it on beta raving about it. That matters. Like for people looking forward to something, regardless of its initial description. Have you seen a lot of people trying delves on beta and just like shouting from the rooftops how insane delves are? Like try to grind delves until you can get to the 68th level of Torghast or whatever. Like that's not happening. That being said, I'm not convinced either way. I actually think there's like a pretty good middle point with delves where, you know, it's clearly not made for us. I did all the levels of delves, and then obviously we haven't done like the 13th delve, which I think is like kind of like a labor of love to people who play this game at higher skill levels as well, and maybe also like a mage tower type achievement for people who can aspire to do that. That might be there, but like, you haven't seen anyone hyping it up. Like Blizzard can hype it up all they want. I think that's why content creators or people who are playing this beta, which now anyone can if they want to, right? They, or if you want to pay for the Giga Edition, if you can afford that, there hasn't been people shouting from the rooftops that delves are insane. It just feels like everyone feels like delves are okay. Am I wrong about that? Even though I feel
I've actually never seen a video. Like I haven't seen any videos or anything popping up about delves. Like the only thing I've ever seen is just Dratnos streaming delve at one time.
Yeah, they called me Delvin
like
Melvin.
Yeah,
That's
that's
right.
Wait, what
really
did you do? Did
experience
you
with,
do
like,
all Melvin? What did you do? Did you do all? Of them?
I just pushed the delves up to tier 11 or whatever, and you know,
Oh, that's what I did.
did them.
I thought you
and-
were like deep in there. Like
No,
you
no,
did
no.
like
I just did them. Yeah, same thing you did.
you know, just doing them. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there hasn't been a whole lot of like delve content, the same way whenever say like Cataclysm Classic is coming out, there's like all PvP videos and people trying to figure out like how PvP works in Kata and how classes work in Kata. I do wonder
that
what
is somewhat
the selling
worrying, right?
points-
Like if nobody actually wants to do
Yeah.
that with delves, maybe that's good. Like on the one hand, it's like, oh, these sweaty beta players, Max and Dratnos, don't want to do delves on beta like they did with Torghast. So maybe that means it'll be fun for us casuals like Torghast wasn't. But I'm not convinced. I feel like if there's no pull to like actually try them out, because I feel like if Torghast made it live, like if they just iterated on some of those earlier beta versions instead of changing it all the ways they did, it would have maybe been pretty compelling content. I don't know. Maybe not.
I
Not
do
with
think
the reward
having like
structure.
videos to drive the hype is like pretty important. Like, it's like
Yeah.
what Max said earlier.
I still think
Also,
it
but I
may
mean-
not be hype, but it might be a really compelling gameplay
Yeah.
option for a lot of those people. Like I
Yeah.
could see the expansion going live, and after it goes live, I could see the normal man, the everyman WoW player being very pro delves in the first few weeks for sure.
So here's the other thing about War Within, and to some extent Dragonflight as well, is like the good things of Dragonflight and War Within also aren't like the expansion level. Like they're evergreen stuff that these expansions are doing to the game, right? Like if you think about an expansion like Legion, it's like, oh, I have all these legendaries and artifacts and all this cool stuff and class halls, and like those were isolated to Legion. Whereas everything cool that Dragonflight did was talents, dragon riding, those are here with us forever, right? Og, also here with us forever, sure. But
Oh,
you know that then War Within, we've got delves, we've got hero talents, which are maybe 3 expansions long, maybe forever. That one, but like delves that's like a forever thing, right? Like War Within, it seems to me like
Intended
another
to be.
expansion. Oh, and warbands. Warbands are a huge feature that I think are
huge feature.
massive,
Absolutely massive,
massively
yeah.
important feature for the game. But it's not like it's not like Legion where it's like, oh, I've got to play Legion so I can do my class hall thing. It's like, oh, this is like an upgrade to World of Warcraft, right? Like World of Warcraft is getting overhauled at the same time as the expansion's coming out, but it's not really an expansion thing. So maybe that contributes to the expansion itself carrying less of the hype, because
there's less shiny things.
yeah, it's like more they're kind of doing some maintenance under the hood to make WoW baseline better that they then will get to carry into future expansions, but necessarily that makes the expansion itself carry less of the excitement.
Yeah,
I
the
don't know.
exact expansion. It's almost like there's less of a difference now between a patch and an
Yeah.
expansion. It feels like the War Within might be a continuation of Dragonflight rather than this big new thing. But like I don't know how that works with them with sub numbers, because like clearly they had such an effort in Dragonflight to keep those up, and we actually saw that they've actually retained more subs. Like they've had less churn rate in Dragonflight than regular expansions. It's probably due to multiple things. They're releasing more content every patch. They release the trading post, makes you want to log in every month. They're like innovating with Plunderstorm and Remix and all these things, trying to like not keep the seasons as stagnant, and they want to give you new things to keep your sub, renew your sub for, or log in for. But I guess you are right, where like they are adding some things, but I don't know. I mean, I guess the closest thing this expansion that should be the shiny things that makes people want to log in, I think, is warbands and the hero talents. Like the hero talents for us, I think we view them as, man, like how balanced are these things? How does it affect your gameplay? But I think for the everyman WoW player, it's really like a, wow, I get to be a fucking one of the 4 horsemen now, and that's like I'm logging the fuck in.
I feel that way as well for pretty much that exact hero talent tree, and then like Scale Commander, a couple other ones. But man, a lot of them, I'm like, you tell me like, oh, log in and become a Master of Harmony or a Shadow Pan. It's just like, I mean,
it's not there. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
They
Drogoh,
definitely.
yeah.
There is not a universal hit rate with hero talents. There are some Templar. You know, all of the mage ones. Even Celestial Conduit for Monk is amazing. Like there are some where like if you play these classes, you want to log in and play just because of the hero talents, but there are classes with none of those.
Hunter.
Hunter, Rogue. Demon Hunter. I think for some specs of Shaman, none of them really hit. But
Shaman's
for
weird
some
because they have a bunch of hero talent trees that are good for one of the specs and just
then
feel
bad
really
for the other.
awkward.
And then
for
as
the
far as
other
I can
spec,
tell with
yeah.
enhance, they're all bad for enhance.
Yep.
Ellie likes one of them, and Resto likes one of them.
Yeah.
Or yeah.
Resto, both feel good for Resto, but Totemic is so bonkers that I think you just that makes Ancestor one feel bad. But that one felt good when it was the only one that was out.
It's kind of like how tier sets feel, where like every patch, it's like tier sets are kind of like a coin flip if it's going to be a really cool thing for you, or if it's going to be like just some passive bonus, or I guess it'll just should be bad. But it's like you're coin flipping a much more major patch expansion, so it can vastly vary people's excitement level playing the expansion based on what class they're looking forward to, which is definitely a unique thing about this expansion. I don't mean this to be super doom and gloom. I'm always, and I think maybe a lot of people listening to this are always gonna be looking forward to a WoW expansion, because it's just turns out anytime you get to play WoW gameplay and WoW class design in PvE or PvP, whatever you go for, there's just always that will release. You can expect a high quality raid. You can expect increasingly worse quality dungeons, unfortunately, but like it's still just like Mythic Plus is still just better than what any other MMO is going to give you. It's better combat in general and just better dungeon design than any other MMO, even though we have some issues with it. So like, you're just going to log in and know what you're going to get, right? And that's still going to exist. But it popping off on Twitch, it popping off within the gamer landscape involves more things, and I think there's less of those shiny things that is capturing that audience, at least as of now. Maybe that changes in the next couple weeks, but
the hero talents, I thought they would iterate more on some of them and add more flavor, but it feels like that's kind of died down a bit in the past few weeks. Like they've made big changes to, like, what was it, Priest, I think it was,
a while ago, or Oracle, yeah.
But it feels like ever since then, there hasn't really been a whole lot more, which is like kind of sad. But if you are playing one of those classes, I mean, there's probably not as much hype as there is with, like, say, DK.
If you're playing a class that has really boring hero talents, just play like a Templar or a DK DPS for like the first tier, and just like experience some new stuff. Because like some classes have it so good. We'll just have a million rep paladins running around.
I mean, there's a lot of class pride.
Yeah.
Like, I think with WoW players in particular, class pride is like a huge thing, and some people will never let go of their class, and whenever they don't get what they want, it feels really bad for them.
Dude, who are the biggest winners, actually? Who would you guys say, hero talent specific, who are the biggest winners in Dragonflight? Mage is obvious. But I think Warlock, too. I think Warlock
looks pretty
also
good. Death Knight.
have 3 really good ones. Death
Evoker.
Knight. Oh, Evoker for sure. Man, all of those like kind of hit across the board, too. Like, every single one of those specs, which is really rare. Hunter didn't. Big losers are like Hunter, Rogue, Demon Hunter.
The priest ones are pretty good.
Kind of Shaman, or the priest ones are good. Yeah.
Yeah. The Shaman.
I think Warrior's mid, as far as I can tell.
Warrior actually, like, Slayer Fury is sick. Both Prot ones are sick.
Oh, never mind. Okay.
Yeah, I think Warrior's pretty good.
Warrior's just good. Okay.
I would say Warrior and Priest are like A tier, not S tier. Yeah.
Monk is hard carried by Celestial Conduit, and
yeah, Shadowpan is a complete nothing is happening
huge
here.
stinker.
Burger.
Yeah, huge stinker. Yeah. I don't know. What do you guys in the comments? Try to give us like. Don't feel free to not hide your class pride. Like,
hell yeah.
Tell us what hero talent, or tell us at all if hero talents are making you want to log into the game. Any of you guys that have maybe started listening to this podcast or other WoW things because you're like, I want to get into WoW again, and it's maybe because of this thing. Or are you guys, you just know what you're going to get from a season? I'm logging in. WoW's always a good hang for a couple months or whatever, and then you're going to do whatever. But who knows? I always want to understand our audience more. I want to know what kind of WoW gamers you guys are. Or if you guys are some other people. There's actually a surprising amount of people who haven't played WoW in a while, but still follow WoW as content. Like, I know there's a decent amount of our podcast listeners that have not played WoW in a long time, but they'll never miss an episode, which I find fascinating.
Yeah, shout out to
there are a lot of
players.
tourists with WoW. That's the biggest thing. Like, remember back in the beginning of Dragonflight, we had like a ton of WoW tourists.
I think start of expansion is the huge time for that to happen. Yeah, like dude, I think they should make a mythic only phase on a first boss of an expansion again. I think that would be hype for Race World First, because I think that's like one of the most exciting times for people tuning in to watch that as well. Now that there are actual raids there, so I don't know. I feel like Blizzard should. I think they should because I feel like if you look at the last few expansions, there's been a lot of like the first raid kind of being meh, but also being the one that more people play. Like, I think
Except for Shadowlands.
Catherine After was sick.
Yeah,
but like
Vault,
Vault was like, I don't know. It feels a little half-baked for an expansion that was the one that most people played out of any of the 3 this expansion. I don't know. There's a little tangent, but
I mean, no, we've talked about it before. This was like we've always had this tangent when we were talking about like Legion and BFA, where it's like it's such a shame that so many people play these at the beginning, but both those expansions were objectively way better at the end.
Yeah.
Then it's like, how can you flip that? Like where you have the expansion, I guess, tank over time, but just start out on a heater.
I mean, that's basically what Dragonflight did. Yeah, that's.
Oh, actually, true.
Yeah, except for the raid quality, maybe.
Yeah, class sound, certainly.
15 minutes ago, you mentioned Season of Discovery Phase 4 as well, which I just briefly wanted to tangent that because it seems to me like a huge blunder for them to not promote Season 4 or Phase 4 of that, because if you think about Classic WoW, like, what are the most iconic moments in Classic WoW, right? It's like...
hitting max level.
Well, a lot of it is Phase 1 stuff, right? Like creating your character, starting zone, that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. And then a lot of it is like Molten Core and like Onyxia and the stuff that's in Phase 4. And like Phases 2 and 3 I think kind of tanked, understandably. They were kind of boring, but I feel like Phase 4 they should have invested in that again, because to me that seems like the time that is one of the, besides your first 10 levels, is one of the most, memorable parts of vanilla was the beginning of the max level experience. So that was a little tangent that I
do you think that they
from that.
Didn't market it? Or like for example, do you really think they marketed Season 2 or Season 3 more than 4, or do you think the community marketed it by being hyped about it?
Yeah, I guess the hype has fallen off. Yeah, because
exactly.
They did do Season or Phase 1 and like the start of Season of Discovery, obviously, when they announced it at BlizzCon. So I guess that one got a lot of hype, got a lot of viewership. Looked like it worked out pretty well for at least the first week or two. But yeah, I think they should have done much. Like the fact that none of us knew that it was coming out last week seems like a blunder. That seems like that shouldn't have been true.
Yeah, it was weird. We were doing something on Saturday, and someone was like, Season of Discovery these 2 days ago. I was like, what? Like, no way. I looked, and it was like, yeah, it's true. Like, I just think maybe 2 is like, I don't know, Classic came out in 2016, 17, 18, something like that? 2018?
Yeah.
No, it can't be 16.
Yeah, that was Legion. It came out in the middle of BFA.
It was Jara's Eternal Palace. I remember because one of our warriors, in fact, our only warrior on that fight, quit so that he could go and sit in queue in Classic instead.
Did Shadowlands come out in the end of
2019?
Shadowlands came out in 2020, like near the end of the year, right? Yeah. So Eternal Palace would have been late 2019. So I was way wrong. So 2019 was when Classic. Is it possible it's been 5 years since Classic is released and like people did all the Classic, they did all the expansions up until the nostalgia fell off, right? They went through Wrath. They had like another hardcore phase, and then they did Season of Discovery. While I'm sure I've heard some complaints about Season of Discovery, but maybe a question I have is like, do you think that like Classic, at least for has been like milked as much as you kind of can? Like they've just done enough Classic content?
No, bro. One more fresh start. You just got to give us one more fresh start. That'll be really good. We need it.
Yeah, we just got to wait for Classic.
Yeah.
Like when they release Classic version of the 2019 Classic, that'd be great. No, but like I swear, I feel like with Classic, it's just one of those games that you can always return to, and people will always play. I don't know if it'll ever really like truly
not like die,
down.
But of course it'll never die. I'm just saying like,
yeah, like is the
hype was gone? Massive. It was massive, and I think the latest peak was like Season of Discovery release, and then before that was hardcore. And like I think Classic has such a distinct Twitch community where they're always looking for like the new thing, but I just wonder if I'm sure Season of Discovery is riddled with problems. It was just a thought I had where maybe people have just kind of done the Classic thing enough, and then it just eventually kind of just you've done it before, even if it's like a twist. But who knows? We're also just making all of this up, so that's great.
Yeah,
I don't think any of us
you guys have heard.
But
there is that whole Turtle WoW thing. They like recently had like a trailer of having like an Unreal 5 version.
They got cease and desisted. So this is like it was a private server that like recreated WoW in the Unreal Engine, so it like looked giga different and all like like kind of modern-y. I guess it's sort of just like a regular game in the Unreal Engine, but they posted a trailer and then it got a lot of views, and then obviously Blizzard was like, "Hang on, you can't do that." So they had to take it down.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I feel like
cool. I'm looking at it now. That does look cool.
It doesn't look like WoW at all, but it does look interesting.
It still keeps some of the flavor of WoW. It's just
it absolutely keeps the flavor of WoW. Yeah.
I wonder if that's.
Did people create it with like class design and stuff? Like you can play WoW classes in the Unreal Engine.
It's the same WoW. It's literally just WoW, just they like modernize a bunch of like graphics and
oh wow,
all that stuff.
Yeah, no wonder Blizzard took that down. That's a good idea for them.
Yeah, they're gonna do that in WoW too in 10 years. Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised if there were actual WoW devs playing that and like, maybe we should have this in Season of Discovery.
I don't know. I know that at least from what I can tell from the few Blizzard people that I know is they have a very, very low opinion of pirates or of private servers. They actually exclusively refer to them as pirate servers. And they, yeah, I don't think like I'm actually pretty sure like I don't think they would ever do something like this, but I know they would definitely not like it if people that they work with as content creators like brought that kind of stuff up on their stream. Like I don't think they have like a very negative relationship with that, which kind of makes sense. They're like turbo stealing their shit, but yeah, they're not fans.
Yeah, I know. Like if you stream private server content to Twitch at all, you do get
you'd be blacklisted forever from them.
And if you get like a decent chunk of viewers like into the double digits or whatever, there's a decent chance that if they like they'll find out about it and then they'll get Twitch to take your channel down. So which is within their rights, like you're streaming, their IP, but yoinked. So I don't know. Private servers are bad. Stay away from them. But there are some that have put up some cool. They do some stuff where you look at it and you're like, okay, that is kind of cool. Like I remember there was that. I won't name it, but there was the one that did like classless WoW, where you kind of drafted abilities and stuff, and a lot of that stuff was somewhat reminiscent of what they ended up doing with Season of Discovery with the rune system and things. It was pretty different, but still. It's kind of one of the things that was cool about Season of Discovery was that there was that same kind of vibe of like, what if we took Classic but twisted it? And sometimes private servers do that in ways that are interesting to think about.
Yeah, they're bad. Season of Discovery, it seemed like Season 3, or not Season 3, but Phase 3 was what really soured a lot of the Classic players.
I mean, I feel like the going from 10 to 20 raid size has got to just be one of the bad things.
Yeah, it's what killed WildStar. You went from 20 to 40. Anytime you have to mash your group with another group, it's just like super not enjoyable, regardless of whatever group size it is.
Yeah.
But also, I think there was less new things to discover. Like the first time in Season of Discovery, it was new. There were ranged tanks. There was like all these glyphs you had to discover, and it seemed like that was just a process that people were looking forward to going through again. Like that was actually what they enjoyed. But then that process just didn't really happen in the second and third phase. It kind of was just the same thing again, and it didn't change the game that much, I guess. At least was the complaints that I heard, which is kind of interesting because you remember when they heard about this, and Blizzard kind of hinted at this as well, where like this is kind of like a beta for, this is what people were saying, this is a beta for Classic Plus, which is, I don't even know really what that means, but it's like Classic Plus is like something in the Classic universe where they're creating a bunch of new content, I guess, with like old Classic class design, which is, there's actually a lot of issues or problems I could see occurring with that, but I guess Season of Discovery used to be a universal success. I'm just not sure how people feel about that now. I mean, people just straight up aren't logging in. That has to be kind of that's not looking good, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think the question is like, what exactly is going to happen after Season of Discovery for Classic? Because I mean, there's no shot if you're not going to continue doing Classic stuff, right? Like that'd be crazy.
I mean, maybe they want to keep doing hardcore seasons. Do you really see people like getting all hyped up for hardcore? I think hardcore's been milked. I think hardcore's been milked.
Hardcore is also like extremely niche. Like even though it was massive on Twitch, it's one of those things where the best example I've always used is GTA RP. You know how like GTA RP, not a lot of people actually play GTA RP, but the viewership is massive there because like people enjoy watching hardcore. Wow, it's like actually entertaining content for many of the viewers, but in terms of like actually playing it,
it's the same with the ARPGs as well. Like if you look at ARPGs, the viewership between just hardcore and softcore, hardcore gets way more viewers but has way less players.
Yeah, of course,
it's more fun to watch, but it's less
also
fun to play.
It's perfect for like the new short form content meta as well in hardcore because people are really what you're watching the stream for is just to be there when the 5-second clip happens where the guy dies, right? And it's also really good for like getting that out there. I'm not on TikTok or anything, but I imagine like TikTok, like WoW hardcore death clips went hard as fuck and probably got a lot of views and advertised their streams really as well. So like it blowing up is not surprising. But anyways, we're just yapping about Classic. We don't really know what we're talking about, but
that's right.
We could probably meet up with our Patreons and answer one of their questions. And then also we have, I think after this, we're recording a new drama thing as well, right?
Yeah, so make sure you're subbed to the Patreon if you want to hear us talking about about guild drama and stuff that gets sent in. Honestly, content that is I could do for like days just reading.
It's incredibly good content.
So
yeah.
yeah,
it's really fun. Some of you guys have some insane stories, and it's probably an endless well of content because of the amount of people that are watching and listening and subscribing. They are like, there's just a story. You just know everyone with a story. Like our story's been played out, but like if I were to put a drama time, like we had a raider in our guild DDoS the 3rd and 4th healers so they could get raid time. The 5th healer literally obtained their IP and DDoSed our raid members for raid time in a like top world guild, like real story. So like every single one of you guys probably has some crazy thing that's happened. So they're always super fun.
I have some tales that in like 5 or 10 years or something. I'll we can spin some tales of
shit.
You know,
wait, why in the future?
Stuff. Well, you know, just once more time has passed and stuff.
Yeah.
You know, yeah. All right. Our question this week comes from Alex from the Patreon that says, "Pod greetings. For War Within Season 1, I'm taking over as my guild raid leader, and I was wondering if you guys have any good bits I can use to fill dead air when we're not talking about tactics or in a pull. I personally struggle with small talk as I've suffered from social anxiety in the past. This is no longer an issue, but nonetheless, it's a skill I want to / feel the need to work on. Are there specific things that I can do or say as a raid leader to keep the vibe excellent? Pod, thanks." Max, go ahead and get some bits.
I mean... you can't just give people bits. Like all bits are organic within the people. Also, as the raid leader, you don't need to randomly make small talk to make people feel comfortable. That's not even your job. Like I feel like in a lot of guilds,
that's so true.
Like that environment fosters and creates itself within the people you have, and that doesn't need to be you. And it's really like for us, our guild just sounds like a bunch of like dudes hanging out at a bar, just shooting the shit, saying whatever, and we've all known each other for a really long time. So that's what fills our dead air. But your guild might not be like that at all, right? It's totally dependent on the people there. It's also, I think, interesting in people changing guilds. I think that's maybe one of the under talked about problems with changing guilds is you might be in a guild that has a vibe or an atmosphere that you like, and then you go to a guild with similar rankings or you want to improve your ranking, and now it's like a toxic hellscape, and there's like these different cliques, and then like no one actually gets along, and raid's super lame because no one is funny, and you know, like there's all kinds of stuff like that is like totally guild specific. So I don't think that should fall on you at all. Like even if you're a raid leader that's great at what you do and you actually don't say a peep until the poll ends, until the next poll starts, that's perfectly fine, right?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, like if you're funny and can be funny on comms, that's good. But the question then to us is kind of like, how do you be funny? Which,
yeah, he's like asking us to tell him a good joke to tell his raid. Like I don't know, man.
Yeah.
Like
from my experience, it's always not the raid leader. It's always like, you know, the 5 or so people in the guild that like always say stupid shit in the middle of like. You know what I'm talking about, right? Like, there's always those guys who just say something silly or like bring up like dumb conversations, and it's always the raid leader who has to do the opposite, where the leader would be like, "Guys, we got to clear cobs," or
your job is to
focus up or whatever. Yeah. Like, so there's always like somebody else who ends up doing the job, but I could imagine, you know, maybe like in a guild where people are a little bit more. Less familiar with each other, I would say. Then, you know, it might be weird, but no idea how that goes.
I mean, I think you actually bring up a really good point. Like, I think a valuable raid leader skill is actually knowing when to let people have fun and to not tell them to clear comms, and to make the balance between making your raid enjoyable and also efficient, I think is really interesting. And knowing when to let people go, and then also knowing when to kind of have people chill out a bit so you can progress. That's something that people at every guild level does. I can just tell you the worst thing you could possibly do is be the fun shutter down guy. Like where like people are actually having a good time and you're just like, no, it's all about me and my calls. Everyone else shut up. Like that's the worst thing you could possibly do. Like having people meme too much and you not progressing as well is actually such a smaller offense than doing that. So be fun.
Yeah, reading the vibes is the more important thing.
Yeah, which I mean is obviously like one of the most important and most difficult skills to develop as a general human for life, is like vibe reading and reacting well.
Don't be a vibe destroyer.
Yeah. I will say in terms of like things that you actually can actionably do, I think one thing that you can try and help facilitate is an environment of a guild where people do stuff together outside of raid. So that might be something that you could kind of take the initiative on and like play other games with people going into War Within, like ask if people want to go play Overwatch or Path of Exile or whatever, or something like figure out what people are playing and find a reason to get people together in Discord. Because if you've got your guild and then within your guild everybody is still hanging out, like if I go to my guild Discord right now, there's 5 of them in Discord hanging out right now, and like if you can get a guild like that, that translates into raid as well. Whereas if you have a guild where people are only hanging out during raid time, it's naturally a lot harder. The vibes can still be good, but if you build the vibes outside of raid, they come into raid with you, and that I think that's true. Like if you look at any really successful guild, it's usually true that not everybody, but like there are a lot of really strong friendship links that transcend just the raid hours among people in the guild.
There is nothing more sick than like being in a guild or a group of friends or whatever where you're like, you get off work, you have a day off, whatever, and you just know you can open Discord up and just like join basically a friendly hangout at all times of days. If you guys have a guild like that, never leave. Or if you quit WoW, don't leave that group of friends. That's like super hard to come by. That is something that our guild has that I've been in guilds before where it doesn't have that, and it's just so lame in comparison.
All right, cool question. Good luck with your raid leading. Feel free to send us some more questions about raid lead stuff as well if you have them once they come up in season 1. And
and maybe they'll appear on the drama time too.
That's true. If you have any dramatic happenings come up as a result of your raid leading, or your attempts to,
we had one of those recently.
Yeah, let's send them on in.
Yeah, if you have a really bad bit, maybe it'll show up on
a bit so bad that it just kills the vibe and shatters the morale of your guild.
It's happened. Good. If you one quick tip as a raid leader though, don't do the like open mic sigh thing.
Ooh, yeah.
That has to be the worst raid leader trope of all time, is like I'm disappointed in you all, but I can't say anything productive as to why. I'm just going to fucking whine and moan in chat. Don't do that. That just small thing. Don't do that. Quick shout.
Cool. All right. That's it for this week's edition of the PoddyC. We will be back next week with next week's edition of the PoddyC.
Mm-hmm.
Poddy.
Arrivederci. Poddy. Wait, is that a goodbye?
It's like a arrivederci. Is that maybe that's a hello? Maybe that's the wrong one. I don't know.
What language even is that?
Isn't arrivederci? Is that a? Let's see.
Did Dorki say Padu?
Ooh, that's good.
I like Padu. That's also apparently that's a super broken wordle word.
Ooh, that makes sense because you get all the vowels or a lot of vowels. Okay, arrivederci is until we meet again in Italian, so that works.
Dude, we were doing Wordle with my mom when we were at that family gathering recently, and like my mom is like hard meta games. Like my sister and I did Wordle, and we just pick random words just to like have fun, and my mom's just like, no, like there's a starter word, it's like the most efficient. I'm like, Mom, it's fucking Wordle. Like, what are you doing? Anyways, random aside there.
Your mom's a Wordle elitist? No, you're literally one of those people that's telling people, just play whatever class you want to play. Who cares what's good?
Yeah,
that's you. Exactly. That's what you're doing right now.
I do that all the time. That is my bit.
Yeah. I've had the same starting word in Wordle for over 3 years, and I'm still just waiting for it to pop up.
What is it?
I'm not going to tell. I can't. It's a secret.
Why would you not tell me my?
God damn it!
Well, because then you can grief me the day that it's the 1 out of 1 word, and
but I mean, when are we ever going to play Wordle?
Well, maybe not you guys, but maybe if Fronk is still including this.
That's true.
Wordle's an absolute banger. That's like one of the best games ever. Pretty sure.
I have a group chat with my parents where every day we share the Wordle. So
do you smoke your parents in that game?
Oh no, they're much smarter than me. It's very bad usually.
Oh, that's not good.
Things
I wouldn't be able to do that
ugly.
for the shame.
Yeah.
Would you guys ever play Among Us with your parents?
Absolutely not.
Yes.
Actually, wait, no. Yes, I would. Because like once they would actually get it, my mom would be an absolute hooligan in that game. I know.
They would be meta freaks for sure.
No, my mom would not be a meta freak. She's like, you cannot play board games with my mom because she is a wild animal. Like she just starts screaming and yelling. Like she gets not like angry yelling, like laugh yelling. Yeah, it's bad.
Oh my god, that's really good.
Dude, we should do a Poddy board game.
Hell yeah.
Like not create our own board game, but have like a board game night or something. Oh well, Dorki
What about
doesn't
code
exist.
names?
Yeah.
What is code names?
Oh, it's
Oh, I know code names.
Well, there's
I know
Watson.
code names.
Yeah, that one's a banger.
Yeah,
That could be
I
good.
don't think you want 3 people for that though. Usually, you want like 5 at least. But we could
get all of our
Growl and-
recurring podcast
Yeah.
hosts. Yeah.
Hell yeah, get Fronk in.
No.
That could be a vibe.
Yeah, no.
Dude, I
Not
met
him.
Fronk. Fronk was in my city like 2 days ago. Hung out. We
Wait,
got
what?
food. That's right.
Oh, I saw he tweeted about that. I think.
I don't think he tweeted. He posted in the potty cord in the Fronk.
Dude,
pond.
I have no idea. I have no idea what Fronk does. So like, I guess that makes sense. I didn't even know that was the case. All right, cool.
He was he was in town for a wedding or something. So yeah, we hung out.
He knows people.
I was as surprised as you are.
Yeah, that's crazy. I didn't know that. Woo! Shout out Fronk. He's
Yeah.
gonna be really mad. All good.
All good.
All good. I also love our pod. We just said bye like 5 minutes ago. All good. See you later, guys. Actual real pod bye.
Yep. See ya.